Chapter 150. This interesting discovery made the corners of June Moxie's mouth curl up. He didn't want to have a drinking contest with Old Song because there was no need to. With his status, it would be worthwhile to have a drinking contest with the likes of General Dugawudi, but is it really worth it to compete with the owner of a small inn? The answer is obviously no. But what if the owner of this inn is a Tianxian expert? The conclusion would naturally be reversed. Who is right and who is wrong will be judged by the public, and I will make sure you are convinced. June Moxie smiled, revealing his white teeth. Because his mood suddenly became incomparably good, he looked at Old Song like a hungry wolf staring at a fat lamb. Even Old Song, who is a heaven stage expert, couldn't help but shiver inexplicably. How can this kid's eyes be so evil? That's for the best. Young man, a bet must be fair, what if you lose? The middle-aged man seemed to be eager to see the world in chaos. In his eyes, Old Song is not a simple character, but this mysterious young man is even more unfathomable. Perhaps this bet between the two will be very interesting. Why would a spectator be afraid of making a big deal out of it? Otherwise, what else can I do besides watch the fun and entertain myself? The middle-aged man's eyes flashed a trace of bitterness. If you lose, I only hope that in the future, no matter what happens, you will never talk about the quality of the wine, because you are not worthy. Old Song fixed his eyes on June Moxie. Admittedly, your point of view on wine is very reasonable, but you still cannot insult the wine itself. After all, this is a craft passed down from generation to generation, so before you truly understand the quality of the wine, it is better not to judge it. It's a deal. June Moxie replied without hesitation. If he were to lose in the face of such inferior wine, then he would really be laughing his head off. Wait. The middle-aged man couldn't wait to open his mouth and smile. For the sake of fairness, shouldn't there be a witness to this drinking contest? It can't be decided by the two of you judging the outcome, right? Even if both of you are fastidious people, you still have to avoid suspicion. This person is crazy about wine, how about I be the witness? Not only will I be the witness, but I will also be the judge and judge. These two people's words are so fierce, the wine they will bring out will naturally not be ordinary. If I am the judge, then I will have the opportunity to taste two wines at the same time. Regardless of who wins, I will be able to taste two great wines. This is a great joy in life. The middle-aged man couldn't help but feel happy at this thought. Old Song, Old Song, you should bring out the wine under your bed this time, haha, good. Old Song, of his heart, Old San suddenly felt a little nervous. Old San, old Song, old man. Old of old said. Old of Old Song suddenly felt, Old San felt a bit more of worry. Of the feeling of old Sia, he felt suddenly of old. Thinking of this, old Song's heart suddenly calmed down, but in his heart, he still vaguely felt that if he lost, it might not be a bad thing. Perhaps it would be able to bring his winemaking skills to the next level. Even if he couldn't improve his skills, at least he would have a direction to move forward in. After 3 days, I will close early in the afternoon. Everyone will meet here, how about it? Old Song proposed. June Moxie smiled and nodded. But in his heart, he was thinking, this mysterious Tianxian expert, does he have any organization behind him? Could it be Huang Huahal's people? Is it really like what he said, they are the same people? June Moxie thought back to the day when he had scared Old Song to the point where he had hurriedly run away. June Moxie looked at Old Song with a smile in his eyes. At that time, with his silver-level strength, he was able to scare away a Tianxian expert. How satisfying was that? 2 caddies of beef, 2 jars of wine. A voice suddenly rang out, I will also be the judge for the wine competition in 3 days. His words were resolute, not allowing any refutation, as if he was a high and mighty emperor, announcing his decision to his subjects. This was no longer a question, but a confirmation, a conclusion, a certainty. But this voice, to the three people in the hotel, was no different than a sudden clap of thunder. The middle-aged man's two bodyguards must be secretly guarding not far away. Old Song himself was a Tian Xian expert, and Jun Moxie's spiritual power was incomparably strong. Moreover, he was an expert in concealment. But even so, they did not discover how and when this uninvited guest came. And this person was currently sitting behind the three of them, a few feet away. The three people turned their heads at the same time, only to see a person sitting at a table not far from their line of sight. Although he was sitting, he gave the impression that he was standing like a javelin. His back was straight, his face was handsome, and the contours of his face were clear. His face looked like it was carved out of marble, and was completely expressionless. Her long hair hung down naturally without any restraint, covering half of her face. This person was dressed in black, and although it was only noon, his black clothes matched his aura and facial expression, giving off a feeling that night had fallen. The feeling this person gave the three of them was that they didn't know how old he was. It didn't matter if they said he was 30, 40, 50, or even 80. It didn't matter if they said he was 80, this person must be an expert among experts, an expert at the pinnacle. From the moment he saw this person, Jun Moxie had come to this conclusion. This person had suddenly appeared in Tianxiang City, and his intentions were obvious. He must have come for the peak level 9 Xian core, such a character, for any force, would be one of the strongest contenders. In addition to this, Jun Moxie also felt a very familiar aura from this person, the smell of loneliness. This kind of loneliness was a proud loneliness, a loneliness that looked down on everything. Just like in his previous life. Just like a lonely wolf king on the prairie, although lonely, but fearless, and did not want to change this loneliness, and in fact, was enjoying it. May I ask who you are? The middle-aged man and Old Song became vigilant. None other than a wine lover. The man lowered his eyes and said lightly, then it settled. Now, bring the wine and beef, and quickly. Old Song lowered his eyes and said, Sir, please wait a moment. Then he turned around and went inside. The middle-aged man laughed and said, In that case, we will be waiting for your arrival 3 days from now. With his status and eyesight, he could naturally see that this person was not an ordinary person. In fact, it was very likely that this person was a legendary dragon. Moreover, since this person had said that he would come in 3 days to judge, then he must not have any malicious intentions. Such a person, it would be best not to offend him. Little brother, I will see you in 3 days. Haha, don't let this old man down. The middle-aged man laughed and waved at Jun Moxie, and then turned around to leave. After he went out, 2 guards came out from the shadows and followed behind him. Your Highness, do you want me to follow that young man and find out his identity? No need, it would be boring if I did that. The middle-aged man laughed, and then his face suddenly changed. That person who just went in, what's going on? Where did he come from? Did someone just go in? No. The 2 guards looked at each other and were very puzzled. Then, forget it. The middle-aged man was secretly alarmed. These 2 guards of his were Earth Xian level experts. Their strength was enough to protect him in the capital city. But, he didn't expect that these powerful guards couldn't even detect the shadow of that man a moment ago. Who was this person? In the hotel. Jun Moxie looked at the black-robed man with interest. He suddenly smiled and said, How is the scenery of the grassland? The black-robed man finally put an end to his indifferent expression when he said this. Then, he slowly raised his eyes, and looked at Jun Moxie. At this moment, Jun Moxie suddenly realized that the black-robed man's eyes were as vast as the boundless sea, as deep and mysterious as the night sky. It was a feeling that made people want to sink into it when they looked at each other. You can see that I come from the grassland? The black-robed man asked slowly. His tone was neither fast nor slow, but every word was very clear. It was as if he had said each word, but he did not seem to be gnashing his teeth. Your shoes are not something that can be found in the Central Plains. Your belt is made of the unique colored hemp silk of the grassland. Are these enough? June Moxie smiled and sat in front of him. These alone are not enough. The black-robed man looked at the table in front of him. Moreover, I did not allow you to sit in front of me. You are not worthy. Not enough? Then let me say a few more things. Your body has the unique smell of the grassland. June Moxie smiled, and there is the lonely smell of a lone wolf. I can smell it. Are these enough? I don't want to stand now, so I naturally want to sit down. Not to mention sitting down, I can even lie down. Then, June Moxie snorted coldly and said, as for whether I am worthy or not, you have your own standards. Isn't it the same for me? If you are no longer qualified to drink with me, then I will naturally stand up. The black-robed man stared at him for a long time. Then, he suddenly smiled and said, that's interesting. If that's the case, then you can sit down. There is no harm in lying down. This black-robed man was very strange. Even though he was smiling, he still gave off a cold and lonely feeling. It seemed that he was not smiling at June Moxie, but rather at the air. At this moment, Old Song's body was bent over. He was holding a jar of wine in one hand and a bowl of beef in the other. He looked at June Moxie, but did not say anything. Instead, he put the dishes on the table and turned around to leave. The black-robed man's eyes were still looking at the table. He picked up the jar of wine with one hand, and did not make the slightest sound. The clay seal on the jar disappeared, and a burst of refreshing fragrance of wine permeated the air. The man lightly said, Tianxiang City is really extraordinary. Even the bartender is an intermediate-level Tianxian. Not bad, not bad. Interesting, interesting. Recommend a novel, Guyuju's official voice. If you like the officialdom of the city, you can check it out. Everyone, I have good news to report. We are going to move. I just had my measurements taken today. The bungalow I'm currently living in can be exchanged for 2 3-bedroom apartments. Ha ha, I'm so excited that I combed my hair in front of the full-length mirror and laughed out loud 3 times gracefully. Chapter 151. Today's first update. I'll try to work through the night. Since it's the weekend, I'll go all out. I'll open my hand and ask for a monthly ticket. Old Song's body trembled, a blue light flashed around him, but he eventually calmed down. With a hoarse voice, he said, Your eyes are like a torch, this old man admires you. But this old man is only a candle in the wind, I'm barely able to make a living here. As for the bartender or Tianxian, I don't care about them anymore. The man in black said lightly, If it's just wine-making, then it's not bad. As for other things, it's better not to think about them. Old Song's body stopped, but he didn't turn around. He said in a low voice, Thank you for your advice. June Moxie smiled faintly and said, Old Song, give me 2 jars of your wine. Today, this young master will also make an exception and spoil the food. Old Song complied, and then left. In his heart, he was shocked at this strange youth's boldness. With the black-cloaked man's cultivation, he could easily kill June Moxie a few times over, yet this kid was still so unscrupulous. You don't want to drink my wine? This time, it was the black-cloaked man's turn to be surprised. I never take advantage of others. If I drink your wine, wouldn't I owe you a favor? There are many debts in this world, but a favor is the most difficult to repay. June Moxie smiled, moreover, I bought it with my own money, wouldn't it be more comfortable to drink it? That makes sense. The black-cloaked man said, then didn't say anything else. He picked up his bowl and drained it in one gulp. Wiping his mouth, he said, This wine is really good, much better than the horse milk wine. But this beef is a bit overcooked, but it's still edible. At this time, the wine that June Moxie ordered arrived. June Moxie didn't stand on ceremony and opened the seal to drink. His drinking speed wasn't any slower than the black-cloaked man's. Although the two were sitting at the same table, they didn't pay attention to each other, only focused on eating and drinking. The black-cloaked man drank very slowly, maintaining the same speed, neither fast nor slow. Even the way he drank and the way he ate the beef was unhurried, natural and unrestrained. Although he was sitting there and drinking, he still seemed to be in his own little world, independent of the outside world. Even the people and things around him seemed to be excluded. After drinking 7 or 8 bowls of wine, the black-cloaked man suddenly discovered something. This discovery made his impression of the youth in front of him improve by several levels. He discovered that although he was drinking alone, the youth's expression and movements were even more lonely than his. He was drinking out of loneliness, enjoying himself. But this young man in front of him didn't seem to be drinking wine. What he was directly tasting was loneliness, it was loneliness. June Moxie raised his head and looked at him. Lenglang, what makes you special is that you know that I drink in front of you just to enjoy your loneliness. If your loneliness is a dish, then my loneliness is wine. It is a pity that the taste of a good dish has changed. It is a little rancid. June Moxie stood up, and casually threw down an ingot of silver. Interesting people also have boring moments, you really shouldn't have taken the initiative to speak. There are too many curious people in this world. Why must you add yourself to the list? He did not look back and left. Before he left, he said, you have already recognized my qualifications, but I stood up on my own, haha. The black-robed man was startled. He suddenly recalled June Moxie's words from before, as for whether I'm worthy or not, and whether I'm qualified or not, you have your own standards. But, isn't it the same for me? If you are no longer qualified to drink with me, then I will naturally stand up. The black-cloaked man's face immediately changed. So it was this kid who said that he was not qualified? To think that I, the solitary eagle, have dominated the world. Ever since I became famous, no one has dared to be presumptuous in front of me. But now, this young man is saying that I am not qualified. He even mocked me right in front of me and left immediately after. This feeling is really strange. Thinking of what he had said just now, the solitary eagle could not help but laugh. It was indeed him who was curious and asked first. And it was the moment the young man answered his question, his mood suddenly collapsed and disappeared. If he had to say that he had ruined the young man's mood, it would be justifiable. Good lad. Even if you did not know who I am and spoke rudely, I will remember you. The solitary eagle had always been proud and aloof. He always pursued being a lone eagle in the sky, a lone wolf in the prairie. Before this, no one could enter his eyes. He had always despised others and did things his own way. He did not care about anything, let alone what others thought of him. But he never thought that he would be despised one day. He was despised by a young man who was much younger than him and whose xian qi cultivation was much lower than him, and after being despised, he had nothing to say. This was the most depressing thing for him. So, this Grandmaster of the Prairie was very angry. In 3 days, I will come and find trouble with you. Let's see if you can still say that I am not qualified. The solitary eagle chewed a mouthful of beef and suddenly laughed. When was the last time I laughed from the bottom of my heart? June Moxie was walking on the road, his heart full of pride. The hitman really did not know who the man in black was, and who he was did not matter to June Dashao. In fact, ever since the solitary eagle had entered the hotel, June Moxie had immediately discovered that this man was not ordinary. And when he had seen through Old Song's cultivation, June Moxie was even more certain of this idea. Even with the art of unlocking the heavens fortune, June Moxie was unable to see through Old Song's cultivation, but this man was able to casually say that this man was at least at the same level as Shin Xian. Moreover, from this man, June Moxie could feel a familiar sense of loneliness. When the two looked at each other, June Moxie could see the calmness and arrogance in this man's eyes. Therefore, Jun Moxie concluded that this man was a peerless expert who had been attracted by the news of the Xian Dan, but this expert's goal was not necessarily the Xian Dan. This was because Jun Moxie could not see any desire to plunder from this man's eyes. In general, if this kind of person had a goal, they would usually have an imposing manner. Jun Moxie himself was this kind of person, so he concluded that this man did not have much interest in the Xian Dan. I am afraid that this man has an ulterior motive. But this kind of existence must know the method to use the peak of the 9th level Xian Dan. Therefore, his identity was secondary, and it was not a big deal even if he did not know. However, Jun Dashao had already locked onto him the method to use the peak of the 9th level Xian Dan. Therefore, Jun Moxie tried every possible way to attract his attention, but it was not enough. Therefore, from the moment Jun Moxie sat opposite him, he began to meticulously plan. From being ostracized, to attracting his attention, to being admired, to making him curious, to taking the initiative to speak, and finally to being despised, a strange person must have a strange way of doing things. Therefore, he had to do the exact opposite. Aren't you very arrogant? I am more arrogant than you. Don't you enjoy your solitude? Then how can you be more lonely than me? In the whole world, I am the only one who transmigrated from Earth. Jun Moxie suddenly felt that his current behavior was very similar to those ladies in his previous life. First, seducing, then acting coy, wanting to reject, and then shouting for help at the moment when the arrow was knocked on the bowstring, and then someone broke in to catch them in the act and blackmail them. Cough cough, vomit first. Based on the current situation, Jun Moxie's plan was very successful. At least until now, Solitary Eagle did not know that he had been inexplicably set up. Chapter 152. By the time Jun Moxie returned home, Tang Yuan had been waiting for him for a long time. It turned out that this guy had been waiting for Jun Moxie ever since he had left the house. Tomorrow? Jun Moxie crossed his legs and squinted his eyes. Tomorrow. Fatty Tang nodded like a chicken pecking at rice. His small eyes flashed with expectation. Third young master, my good brother, I'm counting on you. You promised me before. Fatty acted as if he wanted to pounce on the hitman and hug him. He was very excited. Fatty, don't be so mushy. Don't worry. As long as you do as I say, I'm sure nothing will go wrong. Jun Moxie wasn't boasting, but he was trying to comfort Fatty. Jun Dashao had been working hard these past few days. He had already sent people to investigate the old eunuch Zhu, and had investigated him thoroughly. Apart from his mysterious origins, he was famous for being impartial and impartial. No one should ever think of abusing his authority. Moreover, he was the most meticulous in his work, and never sloppy. Therefore, His Majesty the Emperor was extremely at ease with anything that was handed over to him. Moreover, the old eunuch never betrayed His Majesty's trust, and had never made any mistakes. In addition, the old eunuch Zhu's body was crippled, but he had accumulated a very strange disease over the years, mysophobia. Mysophobia itself wasn't a big problem, and many people had it. It was nothing more than a love for cleanliness compared to the average person, and it wasn't a bad habit. However, the old eunuch Zhu's mysophobia had reached a very abnormal level. For example, he would bathe twice a day, regardless of the season, summer, autumn, or winter. No matter how busy he was, he would bathe twice a day. After each bath, he would change his clothes from inside to outside. Even if someone touched a tree on the road, he would never touch it. Even His Majesty the Emperor couldn't do anything about it. It was said that when His Majesty once gave him a seat, this old eunuch actually took out a snow-white towel from his sleeve and wiped the chair from top to bottom. Only then did he sit on the chair with half of his buttocks raised. Before he could even warm his buttocks, he had to leave again. His Majesty had finished giving his orders. His Majesty was stunned. As for his personal belongings, no one should even think about touching them. No matter how precious the item was, as long as it was touched by others, it would be discarded. Of course, anyone who touched it would also have to pay a price. If their hands touched it, their hands would be chopped off. If their feet touched it, their feet would be chopped off. Regardless of which part of their body was touched carefully or not, there was only one word to describe it: no more. His Majesty's eyes were like torches, and he made the best use of people. He ordered old eunuch Zhu to be in charge of the imperial palace's hygiene. This move allowed old eunuch Zhu to hold great power, but it made the maids and eunuchs in the imperial palace complain incessantly. Ever since eunuch Zhu took charge of this area, the cleanliness of the entire Tianxiang imperial palace could be said to be number one in the continent. The fact that old eunuch Zhu had mysophobia wasn't a secret at all. There were simply too many people who knew about this, and many of them had experienced it before. Thus, almost everyone was trying their best to avoid this old fellow, lest they offend this old pervert, regardless of whether they could provoke him or not. Otherwise, the consequences would only be making themselves unhappy in vain. Jun Moxie had no trouble finding out about this. But this time, Jun Moxie wanted to do the opposite. Destruction was always faster than construction. With eunuch Zhu's seriousness in his work, as long as there was nothing wrong with Tang Yuan's body, he would definitely report it. And after reporting it, the Tang family's old man had already arranged everything. Everything was a matter of course. So, if they wanted to eliminate Fatty, they could only do something to this old eunuch. And, the only thing that could break his sense of responsibility was his extreme mysophobia. Fatty, tomorrow, before eunuch Zhu examines you, take this medicine 2 hours in advance. Then, when the time comes, this and this, this and this, everything will be settled. Jun Mo Xia winked at her. Then, wouldn't it be too disgusting? Tang Yuan pinched the life-saving pill, blinking his eyes in hesitation. Then, I don't care. In any case, I've already given you the idea. Think about it yourself. Do you want to go in and become a kowtowing bug, or come out and have fun? Choose one, whatever you like. Jun Moxie snorted twice. Don't. Tang Yuan grabbed the pill in his hand, the muscles on his fat face twitching. I'll fucking throw caution to the wind. Brave warrior, face it bravely. Jun Moxie patted his shoulder, his face full of deep affection. I will give you my blessing. You will succeed. I will silently support you with my spirit. If you can take my place when I get beaten up, that would be for the best. Tang Yuan grumbled. After this, the old man will probably skin me alive. In order to complete this matter, the family spent a lot of money. All I can say is, I really sympathize with you. Jun Moxie let out a long sigh, his face full of emotions. After this matter blows over, I will go see you. Don't forget. Before you go, do not forget one thing. Do not eat breakfast. Tang Yuan nodded his head solemnly. I will remember. Fatty Tang walked away, and Jun Mo Xia continued to laugh until he was far away. However, Jun Mo Xia couldn't even straighten his back as he squatted on the ground. In fact, Jun Mo Xia was very confident that he could screw this up. However, Jun Mo Xia had never expected that Fatty Tang would make such a huge blunder. And, this blunder had become a legend in the Xian continent. Tens of thousands of people talked about it with relish, and never got tired of it. And, Tang Yuan's name had become famous throughout the world because of this incident. In fact, he had become a celebrity from head to toe. When Jun Dashao found out about it, there was nothing else he could say. He could only sweat profusely. Tang Yuan walked out of the Jun family's residence, bumping into Jun Zhantian, who was returning with his entourage. Both sides walked face to face. Tang Yuan knew that he could not hide. Besides, he was too big of a target and had no place to hide. He could only step forward and salute. Fatty, you came to find my family's Emocia again. Did you lose your wife again? Grandpa Jun glared at him. What are you up to this time? Xia hasn't seen you much recently, but you've really grown a lot. Tang Yuan panicked. Isn't this just a little embarrassing? You're a dignified duke, do you have to keep talking about it and make things difficult for me, a junior? For a moment, he did not know how to answer and stammered. No, no. He subconsciously hid his hands behind his back. Nothing. This old man is a tiger. Why are you so scared? Grandpa Jun asked doubtfully. What's that in your hand? Stretch out your hand for me to see. No, it's nothing. Tang Yuan suddenly became extremely nervous. He shook his head and retreated step by step. Suddenly, he tripped over something and fell to the ground with a plop. Suddenly, the fat on the ground bounced up and down. Grandpa Jun Zhantian laughed. Look at how scared you are. Do you think that with this old man's status, I would snatch something from you? He ignored him and walked through the door while laughing. Tang Yuan wiped his cold sweat and stood up. He was still in a daze when he realized that the pill in his hand had disappeared. He must have dropped it when he fell earlier. This was no small matter. He crawled on the ground and looked for it for a long time before he found it again. This shock, and anxiety caused him to break out in cold sweat. Tang Yuan became confused and could not remember Jun Moxie's instructions clearly. He racked his brains and thought for a long time. Only when he reached the door of his house did he remember, yes, please don't forget to eat breakfast. Sigh, after knowing about this matter, I didn't even have the mood to eat. However, since third young master said so, he must have his reasons. I can only reluctantly eat breakfast. With this thought in mind, coupled with the intense exercise just now, his stomach began to growl. Early the next morning, Tang Yuan ate until his belly was as round as a ball. Burping, he followed his father. He staggered all the way to the imperial palace on his horse, which was swaying from side to side under his weight. Minister Tang looked around proudly. For the sake of Du Ju's accident, he had invited many doctors to examine his son's body. He was sure that there would be no accident this time. Aside from his son being a little fat, there would be no other problems. Therefore, Minister Tang was very confident. What was there to be afraid of being a little fat? As the saying goes, a gentleman is not dignified if he is not fat. Minister Tang looked at his son, who was struggling to move his horse. For the first time, he felt that his son's fat body was quite pleasing to the eye. How joyous! Everyone had their own thoughts on the way to the imperial palace. Fatty Tang waited for an opportunity to swallow the pill given by Jun Moxie. He felt that his throat was a little dry, so he grabbed a water ladle and gulped down half of the cold water. Only then did he feel much better. There were a total of 9 people participating in the selection. 4 of them were chosen by the big families, and the other 5 were recommended by the officials. Minister Tang had put in a lot of effort for his son's future in order to get through so many strong opponents. What he didn't know was that his son was having a headache about this matter. Moreover, his son had already discussed with his best friend, Jun Moxie, how to ruin his plan. If those 2 people succeeded in their plan, Minister Tang would lose everything he had invested in this time. Now, it was no longer an if. Minister Tang was destined to lose everything this time. Eunuch Zhu's appraisal method was very scientific. He would enter from one side and go home from the other. He didn't want to meet anyone who hadn't been tested yet. Therefore, as more and more people entered, the remaining people became more and more nervous. It was said that although Murong Qianjun passed the test last time, he had to walk outside for more than a month. Everyone knew about this. What kind of examination would make Murong Qianjun walk outside? The more people thought about it, the more their legs trembled. They suddenly felt a sense of sympathy. Chapter 153. After 2 more people, it would be Tang Yuan's turn. Fatty Tang tensed up as he turned his fat and short neck to look around. His eyes were locked on Minister Tang, who was sitting upright in his armchair. Minister Tang knew that his son was unwilling, so he kept an eye on him, afraid that he would run away. Now that he saw him looking around, how could he not know what his son was thinking? He shouted in a low voice, "You brat, you better behave yourself." Fatty Tang shrunk his neck and mumbled a few words, then turned around. Suddenly, he felt his stomach rumble, and his face paled. He turned around and shouted, "I want to, what the hell are you thinking?" Minister Tang glared at him. "If you don't pass this time, I'll break your legs when I get home. If you say one more word, I'll break your legs right now." Tang Yuan's face paled, and he sat down, clutching his stomach. Gradually, the feeling disappeared, and he felt a little relieved. He couldn't help but feel bitter. Didn't June Moxie say that the pill was only for chi? Why does it feel wrong now? He didn't know that June Moxie had said, "Don't eat breakfast," but Fatty Tang had said, "Don't forget to eat breakfast." These were two extremes, completely twisted. Moreover, he had drunk a ladle of cold water, which neutralized the effect of the pill, and was like a tiger that had grown wings. The results of today's test may be the same, but the process, whispers could be heard from the side. It was a young man from the Meng clan and a candidate from the Song clan. "Brother Song, do you know how that Zhu? His Excellency did the inspection?" I don't know, but I heard that after the examination, it will be terrible." The young man surnamed Song said in a small voice. "What's so terrible about it?" Tang Yuan raised his voice, "Murong Qian Jun will be out for a few months after the examination. So what? Both of you will definitely be able to withstand it." As soon as he said this, the two youths' faces immediately turned pale. Minister Tang fiercely looked at Tang Yuan and interrupted him. But in his heart, he was proud. It seemed that his son had learned how to attack his opponents. His efforts were not in vain. Tang Yuan sat on the chair and waited with a clear conscience. As soon as he stopped talking, he suddenly felt a reaction in his stomach. He immediately twisted left and right, as if there were maggots growing under his buttocks. His expression became even weirder. He couldn't hold it in any longer, he couldn't help but curse June Moxie in his heart. "That bastard gave me a laxative, and he said it was to stimulate my breathing." Just as he was about to throw caution to the wind and take care of it, a voice came from inside. "Next, Tang Yuan." Tang Yuan exclaimed, his fat face turning green. Shrinking in the chair, he did not move. Tang Shang was secretly pleased with himself, but when he suddenly saw Fatty's action, he couldn't help but jump up in anger. He shouted, "Evil creature! Your name is called, hurry up and go in." He flew up and kicked Tang Yuan's fat buttocks. Tang Yuan let out a strange cry as he waved his hands and feet as he fell inside. As soon as Tang Yuan entered, he was led by a young eunuch through a long corridor and into a small room. As soon as he entered, he felt cold. Thick curtains blocked out the autumn sun. Tang Yuan suddenly felt cold all over. Especially the old eunuch opposite him. His face was as white as snow, and his white robe was spotless. Even his socks were white, and his eyebrows and beard were even whiter. From head to toe, there was no other color. Tang Yuan suddenly thought of the legendary Soul Reaper, and his whole body trembled. Miraculously, his stomach didn't feel so uncomfortable. "Tang Wanli's grandson? Take it off." Eunuch Zhu's name was very strange, Zhu Zhu Zhu. He looked at Fatty and spoke in an emotionless tone. His spotless right hand pointed at the snow-white cloth in front of him. "Take off your clothes and stand on it." If it was a beautiful woman in front of him, Fatty Tang would definitely take off his clothes faster than anyone else. But the problem now was that the person in front of him wasn't a beautiful woman. Not only was he not a beautiful woman, he wasn't even a man. He was a eunuch that was neither male nor female. Fatty Tang immediately felt a psychological barrier. He dilly-dallied and refused to take off his clothes. Eunuch Zhu's white eyebrows twitched. He raised his eyelids slightly and snorted. He sat cross-legged on the chair without moving, but an enormous pressure immediately surged towards him. In an instant, Fatty Tang felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. Eunuch, can you, please, turn around first? Fatty Tang's eyebrows twitched as he gripped his belt with both hands. Take it off. Eunuch Zhu Lengleng rolled his eyes and said in an unquestionable tone. He really was a man of few words. Hurry up. He didn't have the slightest bit of politeness towards the eldest son of the Ministry of Revenue's minister. Oh. Fatty's entire body trembled. His stomach began to churn again. He had just unbuckled his belt when he turned around with a bitter expression. Eunuch, can I first? Tang Yuan had already given up. I'll just go with the flow. This daddy's pants are about to fall off, Eunuch Zhu didn't seem to like talking. His eyes flashed fiercely as he slowly extended his finger. Suddenly, a blue light flashed from his fingertip. With a few swishing sounds, several blue rays of light shot out like swords. Fatty Tang's loose robes fluttered like butterflies, instantly revealing a body full of excess fat. His enormous stomach almost reached his knees. Fatty Tang let out a strange cry. He wanted to cover his nether regions with his hands, but he slapped his stomach instead. It wasn't that Fatty's hands were short, but that his stomach was too big, covering his target completely. Zhu clasped her hands behind her back and stood up with a cold expression on her face. She walked down from her seat with her hands behind her back. Her snow-white figure fluttered and circled around Fatty Tang's naked body. Her sharp gaze had already examined every part of Fatty Tang's exposed body. Raise your left hand and reveal your armpit. Zhu Lengleng commanded, and Fatty Tang hurriedly obeyed. Although it was already autumn, the temperature in the room was still quite high. Even though he wasn't wearing a single piece of clothing, he didn't feel cold. However, as Eunuch Zhu approached, Fatty felt a genuine chill. It was a bone-piercing chill, and even his tumbling stomach was forcefully suppressed by the chill. Zhu stood 3 feet away, his eyes like cold lightning as he continuously ordered, raise your right hand. Use your hand to hug your stomach and reveal your lower part. Put it down, spread your legs, and spread them wide. Perhaps he was slowly getting used to the old eunuch's pressure, but the chill gradually lost its effect. Tang Yuan's face became more and more sallow, beads of sweat the size of soybeans dripping down his face. His legs trembled, and he really couldn't hold it in any longer. Zhu's clothes were whiter than snow, and her face was completely expressionless. She nodded and floated 2 steps closer. Lengleng said, bend down and raise your buttocks. It's here, it's finally here. Tang Yuan wailed in his heart. I don't want to walk outside, boo-hoo, this old pervert. To think that this young master still couldn't escape from his evil clutches. Hurry up. Zhu clasped her hands behind her back as Lengleng urged. Tang Yuan hesitated and slowly bent down, but this made it even harder for him to control himself, and he almost burst out. He also knew that if he really did burst out, then things would get out of hand. He hurriedly stood up straight and forcefully endured it, but after trying a few times, he couldn't bend down anymore. If he bent down again, he really wouldn't be able to control himself. Old Eunuch Zhu was furious, thinking that Fatty was purposely playing tricks on him. He floated up and directly stepped on Tang Yuan's fat neck, forcefully pressing down. Tang Yuan immediately bent down by 90 degrees. Then, Zhu used 2 wooden sticks in her hands to support his buttocks. Then, she slightly bent down, frowned, and moved closer. She concentrated her energy in her eyes and fixed her gaze. At this time, Tang Yuan finally couldn't bear it any longer. His body contracted, and his throat cried out in pain. Only a poo sound was heard, and a tragedy suddenly occurred. A golden substance surged out from the gap between Fatty's plump August 15th. At this moment, old eunuch Zhu was right in front of him. He had never thought that he would encounter something like this in his entire life, and it was too late for him to dodge. Minister Tang sat calmly outside. With his status, he naturally had his own eunuchs serving the Forbidden Palace's tribute tea. He leisurely tasted it while blowing the tea powder on the surface of the water, and confidently waited for his son's news. He knew that all the youths who came here, although they would be treated by old eunuch Zhu, would definitely pass the physical examination. The only thing that mattered was the financial resources of each family, as well as their relationship with the inner court. And in all of these, no one could compete with him, the Minister of Revenue. Beside him, there were a few other officials who were also here to send their sons and nephews to be examined. They greeted him uncomfortably and smiled dryly. Anyone could see that the Tang family was determined to get the position of the commander of the inner court guards. Most of the younger generation of the Tang family would have to accompany them this time. Minister Tang snorted. "These people want to compete with me, Minister Tang? Ha ha ha, what a joke." Just then, suddenly, a furious roar came from inside the inner room. That roar was filled with a pain that was worse than death, extreme regret, and extreme hatred. It was as if a lifetime of persistence had turned into nothing in an instant. It was as if a heart was being torn apart. It was the voice of old eunuch Zhu. It was also an extremely angry voice. "Get lost. Not qualified." These 4 words were like 4 claps of thunder, exploding in the sky above Tianxiang City. No less than 10 million people heard it at the same time, and everyone who heard it could hear the extreme hatred in that voice. Even Jun Mo Xia, who was far away at the Jun family's residence, had heard this sharp and peculiar voice. He suddenly laughed until his eyebrows disappeared. He proudly picked up the teapot, and fiercely drank a mouthful of tea. Then, he slapped his thigh, got up, and turned around in a half-circle. "Fatty Tang. I didn't think that you'd actually do it. You're worthy of being my future partner. Good job. That's more like it. When have we ever made a mistake?" He paused for a moment, and then couldn't help but laugh out loud. "I really want to see that old eunuch's face right now. I want to see how interesting it is." Jun Dashao didn't know that the expression on old eunuch Zhu's face right now was a million times more interesting than he had imagined. Chapter 154. Little Ku was so frightened by her young master that she trembled. She asked timidly, "Young master, are you all right?" She thought to herself, "Young master has finally turned over a new leaf for a few months, why is his expression so strange today? There's a hint of the wretched and despicable look he used to have in the past. Please don't turn back into the profligate son of a rich family in the palace." Following that angry roar, a huge naked body suddenly shot out like a meteor with a bang, directly smashing into the last hard wall, creating a human-shaped hole. With a "pa" sound, a lump of rotten meat fell heavily to the ground. At the same time, an indescribable stench filled the air in an instant. "Tang Yuan, Fatty Tang." But at this moment, he was already completely unconscious. Blood was flowing from the corner of his mouth, his eyes were tightly shut, and his naked body was sprawled on the ground. There was even a patch of yellow between his crotch. On his originally perfectly round buttocks, there was a deep palm print. The print was ferociously purplish-green, and the edges of the palm print were swollen. There was even blood clotting inside, and it was purplish-black. Perhaps his bones were broken. To be able to break a bone in that area, how much strength did one have to use? Everyone present felt as if they were struck by lightning, their eyebrows twitching wildly. They really couldn't figure out what this fatty had done to cause the usually cold and aloof elder Zhu to be so furious. How tragic, and too pitiful, he was actually beaten to this state, and even the 5 grains reincarnation items were beaten out. In the palace, elder Zhu's face was filled with despair, his entire body trembling like a sieve. His previous temperament, cold, calm, and arrogant attitude, had all disappeared. Old man Zhu's face was covered in yellow stuff, even covering his eyes, snow-white hair, snow-white eyebrows, Snow White robe, Snow White. In short, there were specks of yellow on many important parts of his body. The scariest thing was that he vomited first, into his mouth. Jun Moc's plan and Tang Yuan's cooperation had been a freak combination of factors. The timing that old man Zhu had chosen was simply too coincidental. Tang Yuan had been enduring for a long time, but he finally couldn't bear it any longer. And, the water had flowed downwards like a waterfall, and had spouted straight down to, the correct explanation was that the Yellow River had overflowed and burst its banks. Minister Tang was furious. Anyone who saw their son being beaten up to the point where he turned from a slightly fatter person into a pile of broken meat would be furious. Why? My son is just a little bit fatter. Even if you, old eunuch Zhu, had the power to decide the life and death of this pass, at most, you could just say that you didn't pass. Was there a need to beat someone to such a state? This was too much. It seemed like Fatty only had one last breath left. Speaking of which, Fatty Tang's life was saved in such an accident. It was really a blessing from his ancestors. Jun Moxie had only wanted him to fart at the critical moment, but this bastard had changed the doctor's order without permission, and had become even more aggressive, causing the Yellow River to burst. Old eunuch Zhu, who was obsessed with cleanliness, had suffered such an unexpected disaster today. Not killing him on the spot was already giving His Majesty the Emperor a lot of face, giving Minister Tang a lot of face. Zhu. What do you mean by this? Give this old man an explanation. Minister Tang shouted loudly, his whole body trembling in pain. Looking at his son's miserable condition, he wished he could tear Zhu into 1,000 pieces. After a long time, a gloomy voice full of ruthlessness shouted from Lenglang, Tang Qianyu, if it wasn't for that old man Tang Wanli, neither of you would have walked out of here alive. Now, pick up your bastard son and disappear from this old man's sight. Don't wait for this old man to change his mind and leave both of you here. Everyone outside, get out of here. Finally, there was a thunderous roar, followed by a heart-wrenching sound of vomiting. It was obvious that old eunuch Zhu was vomiting very violently, but why? It was said that old eunuch Zhu was obsessed with cleanliness. Could it be that the yellow and white thing under Fatty was burping in response? Everyone outside looked at each other in dismay as they made their guesses. Then, they all ran away. The smell here was too strong. As for Minister Tang, although he was angry, he didn't dare to talk back. A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him, so he quickly took his son to get treatment. By the time Minister Tang understood the truth, it was already the next day. Old man Tang Wanli angrily went to the imperial palace to seek justice for his grandson. Just thinking about it made him feel aggrieved. I've been friends with old eunuch Zhu for decades. Not only did you not ask to let my grandson go, but you actually beat him up like this? This is really intolerable. The final result of seeking justice was that old Master Tang thoroughly understood the meaning of intolerable, so he came back with a face full of dirt and flew into a rage. He had to execute the family law on Fatty Tang. All the women of the Tang family, including old Madame Tang and Fatty Tang's mother, all knelt on the ground. After much effort, old Master Tang didn't succeed. Speaking of which, Fatty was indeed seriously injured this time. Apart from the serious external injuries, he also had some internal injuries. If he was really baptized by the family law, he might really be able to pass. However, the repercussions were still severe. Elder Tang and Minister Tang were both anxious and heartbroken. After all, for the sake of this matter, the Tang family had poured in a lot of money and favors. It wasn't easy to get through all the connections. As soon as old eunuch Zhu passed the test, the whole family would prepare a celebratory feast. However, at this incomparably critical moment, Fatty Tang's surging, like the Yellow River, was overflowing. And this time, it wasn't just a mere description. It was literally surging, straight to the face, body, mouth of old eunuch Zhu, who had always been a clean freak. Not to mention old eunuch Zhu, who had always been a clean freak, no one could stand it. Both Old Master Tang and Minister Tang were so angry at Tang Yuan's earth-shattering action that they lay on the bed. Grandpa Tang laid on the bed with a dull look in his eyes. He kept repeating, "I've always heard about having diarrhea at a critical moment, but I always thought it was just a joke. Now, I finally know that this strange and evil thing really does exist." Just because it's strange and rare doesn't mean it won't happen. Fatty Tang had just regained consciousness and was still seriously injured when he was chased out of the house by Old Master Tang in a rage. "From today onwards, you are no longer my grandson. You are no longer a member of the Tang family. Get out of my sight. Disappear forever." Things had really gotten out of hand. Fatty was still very loyal. Even under such circumstances, he still didn't choose to betray June Moxie. He wailed twice as he was escorted by a group of female soldiers towards the June family's house. This was also the only place Fatty Tang could seek refuge in at the moment. It was also the place that Grandma Tang had designated for her grandson. There were 3 reasons. First, Tang Yuan and June Moxie were best friends. If he didn't seek refuge with him at this time, who else could he seek refuge with? Second, Fatty was injured, and his injuries weren't light. At least he would have a companion at June Moxie's place. In any case, June Moxie was also recognized as a good-for-nothing, right? Third, the 2 houses weren't far apart. The female soldiers could visit at any time. When leaving the Tang family, Tang Yuan issued 2 orders. First, take away the big cabinet in my room. Second, beat the guy who washes my clothes to death. The first order was easy to understand. The big cabinet contained all of Tang Yuan's personal savings over the years. The amount was not small. Naturally, he had to bring it with him. In the future, he would have to rely on it to settle down. As for the was Herman, that was where Tang Yuan was vicious and merciless. He was a gifted scholar. Moreover, he was a famous scholar from the Golden Scholar competition. Tang Yuan had deliberately abused this hypocrite scholar and kept him here to wash his clothes. It could be said that he hated Tang Yuan to the bone. Now that Tang Yuan had been expelled from the family, this fellow was equivalent to being free. Based on this black-bellied scholar's character, he could easily slip out and find a master to oppose Tang Yuan. It seemed that this kind of thing was completely possible for that genius to do. And Tang Yuan naturally didn't want such a ticking time bomb to exist. In any case, he didn't know when he would return, so it was better to get rid of him as soon as possible. Fatty Tang was currently in a semi-conscious state. After receiving a torrent of abuse from his grandfather and father, he was still able to think of this matter. It was really not easy. When he arrived at the June residence, June Zhantian was laughing arrogantly in his grandson's small courtyard. With Grandpa June's lofty status, it was only natural that he would be the first to hear of such an amusing matter. Tang Wanli's grandson had actually defecated in the mouth of one of the Forbidden Palace's top experts, Zhu. Such explosive news had been verified by Grandpa June. He had laughed all the way home. When he returned, June Moxie suddenly looked like a chicken that had been struck by lightning. He stood there in a daze. "Oh my God, Fatty, you really dared to release such a fiery script." According to the information that the hitman had gathered from various sources, it seemed that eunuch Zhu was at least a Tian Xian expert. In fact, his strength wasn't even below that of his grandfather, June Zhantian. What kind of person was that? Seeing that his grandson had no intention of laughing after hearing such a hilarious joke and was in a daze instead, the old man asked in bewilderment. June Moxie held his head in his hands. He looked like he was crying and laughing at the same time as he said, "This idea, it seems like it's possible, maybe it should be me." June Zhantian and June Wui both choked at the same time. They looked at June Moxie, dumbfounded. Although he added a few uncertain words at the beginning, this information was even more explosive. If eunuch Zhu knew that this matter was not an accident but man-made, then, Jun Zhantian and his son were both drenched in sweat. My original intention was for him to let out a fart while eunuch Zhu was inspecting his buttocks. So I gave him a pill to stimulate his breath. Jun Moxie innocently looked at his grandfather and uncle. Fatty Tang didn't want to become an official, so, who would have thought that this matter, which was originally quite easy to handle, would become like this under Fatty's hands. God makes fools of people. Chapter 155. Jun Zhantian and Jun Wui didn't know that the matter with Fatty Tang was just a child's play. Not only was the root cause of this matter Jun Moxie had been involved, but everything that had happened in the capital over the past few months, including the explosion of the imperial tutor Li's Dantian, the visit of the imperial tutor, and the visit of the imperial tutor, had led to Tianxiang City becoming a place where gold Xian Yu Xian was rarely seen in the past. Earth Xian Xian experts, Tian Xian experts, and Shen Xian had been guarding the city from the shadows. All of these strange situations had been traced back to this innocent and smiling brat. This matter ends here. It must not be leaked. Grandpa Jun was, after all, a shrewd and astute person. That old bastard Tang Wanli is probably half crazy right now. His eyes are green with greed and he wants to find someone to cause trouble for him. Just keep this matter to yourself. As long as that fatty Tang Yuan doesn't say anything, just pretend that nothing happened. At this point, Jun Zhantian sighed and said, fortunately, it was Tang Wanli's grandson. If it was someone else's grandson, I'm afraid he would have been killed by Zhu on the spot. Moxie, this is a very dangerous thing to do. Let alone old eunuch Zhu. Even old man Tang might not be willing to let this matter rest if it were to be known by others. What do you mean by that? Could it be that Tang Wanli's grandson was special? Although Fatty and I weren't sincere in our actions, it was just a mischievous act by the younger generation. It shouldn't be that serious, right? Could there be some hidden story behind this? Jun Moxie really didn't understand. Although old eunuch Zhu was an expert of Tian Xian and had an extraordinary status in the palace, he shouldn't have gone so far. That Zhu is not just an ordinary eunuch. Moxie, I know that you have improved a lot recently. However, you still need to be more cautious in your actions in the future. It is better to be safe than sorry. Grandpa Jun said earnestly. Grandpa, Moxie also knows that old eunuch Zhu is a Tian Xian expert, but he is still a eunuch. You won't tell me that he was originally a great general, right? Jun Dashao said disdainfully. Hitman Jun looked down on those who willingly mutilated themselves to enter the palace as slaves. Moxie, this is really your fault. How could you have known that Zhu was not just a general in the past? His position in the Tianxiang Empire's army was only below that of old Dugu and me. Only 2 or 3 other people could compare to him. It's just that fate makes a fool out of us. The old man sighed with emotion. Ah. Could it be? At this time Jun Wui interrupted, Father, you said that old eunuch Zhu, could it be that he is actually the great general Zhu Zonglong who was as famous as you and Dugu Zongheng? But didn't he die in battle? Grandpa Jun shook his head. Other than His Majesty, this old man, Tang Wanli and a few others, no one else knows about this secret. Back when His Majesty was still the crown prince, he and Zhu Zonglong led the army into battle. This old man led the right army and Dugu Zongheng led the left army. At that time, Tianxiang was only a small country in its embryonic form. During that battle, the central army was ambushed and we were unable to rescue them in time. The crown prince, together with 2 generals, Tang Wanli and Zhu Zonglong, were captured. The enemy was determined to humiliate the crown prince and destroy the morale of our army. At that time, Zhu Zonglong was handsome, so he pretended to be the crown prince and was imprisoned in the Carrion River. Carrion Stream? Jun Wui and Jun Moxie looked at each other and understood. Just from the name, one could imagine what kind of place that was. This old man rushed hundreds of miles to rescue the crown prince, and fought to the death with the enemy. At the last moment, they used Zhu Zonglong to threaten me. At that time, Zhu Zonglong's body was no longer in human shape. The carrion stream is filled with poisonous insects, snakes, and rats. When he entered, he had already suffered from serious injuries. Moreover, his xian qi was sealed, his entire body was bitten by tens of thousands of poisonous insects. Even his crotch area was in a mess, a pity for a great general, just like that. Grandpa Jun sighed in melancholy. So that's how it is. No wonder such an expert was a eunuch. No wonder he had such a serious obsession with cleanliness, Jun Moxie finally understood. No wonder eunuch Zhu was so favored in the palace. If it wasn't for him, then His Majesty the Emperor would have been the one to bear all of this. Jun Moxie couldn't help but regret that he had insulted this respectable general. This was another part of the hitman Jun's charm. He would admit his mistakes if he was wrong. Of course, he would only admit his mistakes in his heart. His mouth would still be a dead duck's mouth. In the end, our side fought back and won a great victory. But Zhu Zonglong was completely disheartened. Moreover, he was injured and sick. His appearance was haggard, and he no longer had the courage to live. For the next few days, he refused medical treatment. He didn't eat or drink. He was determined to die. Tang Wanli was with him at that time. He said, "You saved my life. If you don't live, then I won't live either." So he went on a hunger strike. For the first 3 days, Zhu Zonglong was indifferent. He was on the verge of death. Tang Wanli held a knife in front of him. He cut off pieces of his own flesh. He said, "If you continue to be like this, then I will cut myself into a skeleton in front of you. That way, I won't be able to bear seeing you die first." Jun Wui and Jun Moxie looked at each other. Their hearts were filled with horror. That was an aphrodisiac, it was simply. Tang Yuan was full of energy. He gritted his teeth and looked ferocious. That was simply a laxative. Fuck, I felt that something was wrong the moment I entered the palace. I was barely able to control myself. Later on, that old eunuch used a wooden stick to mess with my chrysanthemum. Fuck. Brother, I couldn't control myself anymore. I spat it out. Stop it. Jun Moxie looked like he wanted to vomit blood. How could it be a laxative? How could I make a mistake when I made it myself? How could it be like this? I followed your instructions this morning, and ate a bellyful before I went to the imperial palace. Then, I ate that pill before I went to see the old eunuch Zhu. Ah, it's really strong, and then. Tang Yuan struggled to raise his head and accused Jun Moxie. He denounced with a tearful voice. What? Jun Moxie finally knew where the problem was. You ate breakfast this morning? Didn't I say it clearly yesterday? Didn't I tell you not to eat breakfast? Why did you still eat? Would it kill you to skip a meal? That was originally an aphrodisiac. It was more of a laxative than a laxative. Once there was something in your stomach, how could it be good? Ah. Tang Yuan was stunned. After being reminded, he immediately remembered. He immediately beat his chest and stamped his feet. So it was me who got it wrong. Alright, this can be considered as fulfilling your wish. You've achieved your original goal. Isn't it just a slap? Is there a need to do this? Jun Moxie was very disdainful. According to my original plan, you should have suffered a slap too. But you shouldn't have suffered so badly. Now you've pooped all over his face, body, and mouth. Blarg. Jun Moxie retched. It's already good enough that you're not beaten to death. That's right, I was scared to death at that time. You don't know, that old eunuch was actually an expert from Tianxian. He wielded a sky blue light sword and used his qi to control the sword. He easily stripped me naked but didn't hurt me at all. At that time, I couldn't control myself and thought that it was over. There must be no cure. But in the end, that old eunuch showed me mercy. I heard that it was because he was friends with my grandfather. If it was someone else, they would have been dead by now. Fatty Tang was somewhat proud of himself as he said this. Then, he heartlessly said, "Grandpa has finally said that he's going to kick me out of the house. Fortunately, I've been prepared for this. I've saved up a lot of money over the years. Although it's not a lot, it's not a small amount either. This is called being prepared." He suddenly said nervously, "Third young master, if you want to gamble, you're not allowed to steal my money. Times are different now, this is all I have." June Moxie was stunned. What's going on? So this guy doesn't have any reaction to being kicked out of the house? Fatty Tang winked. "Third young master, what's wrong with you? We're all family. It's not like you don't know that I've been kicked out 3 times. Is there a need to be so surprised? I have to put on a show for the outsiders." June Moxie stared at him dumbfounded. Finally, his neck couldn't support his head anymore. His head free fell onto the coffee table and even bounced twice. Ahem, let's digress a little. After all, Fatty Tang is the first successor of the Tang family. It's impossible for him to just follow June Moxie around. Therefore, during this period of time, such a plot was arranged. Firstly, it's funny. Secondly, it can be considered as the establishment of the evil Monarch's faction. And, next, June Moxie will start to establish his own faction. Of course, there will be a lot of jokes. Whether it's a battle of wits or strength, it will be very enjoyable. Please rest assured. During this period of time, Feng Ling's updates have not been satisfactory. I apologize for this. After all, the results of this book are not bad. However, the better the results are, the more pressure there is. Feng Ling won't overestimate himself and say that it's a classic. However, Feng Ling can guarantee that every scene in the book is something that no one has seen before. At least, in a certain aspect, it's unexpected. Currently, we are also working hard in this direction. Of course, the environment of a different world may be similar. Brothers and sisters, please forgive and support me on this point. Chapter 156. Your whole family is this young master's disgusting image. A lifetime of disgusting image. June Moxie said with difficulty, and suddenly roared, "Fatty Tang, I've taken you in today. If you can't build a business empire for me, I'll pull out all the fat in your body and use it as a sky lantern. Remember what I said today. This is what I was born to do." Tang Yuan raised his fat neck with great effort and said in a very proud manner, "First, tell me your plan. I'll see if there's anything I can do to improve it. Then, I'll give you some pointers. Then, you can watch as this young master shows off his fists and feet. I'll see how all the gold and silver in the world fall into your hands. It's you in my arms." June Moxie corrected, "You're not only responsible for making money for me, but you're also responsible for spending money for me. Otherwise, what's the use of making money? If you can't use it properly, even piling up a mountain of gold is useless." As he said that, he took out a few pieces of paper from his bosom. "I don't have time to talk to you, this is my plan. Take a look, I don't really understand these things. You claim to be an expert, so give me some advice, and we'll be doing this from now on." As he said that, he patted a certain vital part of Tang Yuan's body, and walked out amidst Fatty Tang's pig-like screams and curses. Tang Yuan muttered disdainfully, "I've been doing business all my life, and you're the one who wrote a business plan for me to look at? This is fucking hilarious. Let me take a nap first, then I'll revise and teach you." He closed his eyes, stuffed the pieces of paper from June Moxie under his pillow, and fell into a deep sleep. It wasn't that June Moxie didn't like Fatty, but that young Master June was really busy, very, very busy. For the past 2 days, whether he was walking or sleeping, he'd been researching that strange yin-yang escape technique. The ability to become invisible at any time, anywhere, was simply a life-saving talisman. As long as I master this skill, who can do anything to me? Even if all the supreme martial artists in the world, Shin Xian, were to surround and attack me, I would become invisible with a single hand seal. You bunch of stupid birds, how are you going to kill me if you can't see me? Therefore, Jun Moxie worked tirelessly and brought out his greatest enthusiasm to cultivate the yin-yang escape. In order to experience this technique, Jun Moxie had used up all the qi in his body more than 50 times in a single day. More than 50 times, he had emptied his body of qi, and was completely exhausted. Even though the Hongjun Pagoda provided him with a strong supply of spiritual energy, but Jun Moxie's supply still couldn't meet the demand. He had to study the yin-yang escape technique every second, and the amount of spiritual energy needed to activate it was extremely large. Often, in less than 2 practice sessions, Jun Moxie's painstakingly accumulated spiritual energy would be depleted. Therefore, the Hongjun Pagoda would crazily produce spiritual energy to replenish it. Then, Jun Moxie would practice again. Then, he would find time to replenish it again. The cycle repeated itself. However, this repeated process also brought about a virtuous cycle for Jun Dashao. It directly caused Jun Moxie's cultivation to rise to a new level in these 2 days. However, the disadvantage of Jun Dashao was that he didn't have a good teacher to guide him. He could only rely on himself to explore. This was equivalent to the blind touching an elephant. Little by little, he suffered a lot. What really made Jun Moxie depressed was that it seemed that there was no effect at all. He practiced until he was physically and mentally exhausted. Even his soul, which seemed to know nothing about fatigue, was tired. If there was any effect, it would be that the little lowly Ku'er was a little crazy. That was the only effect that could be seen from it. Ku'er, can you see me? I can see you. Young master, what do you mean? Are you telling me a joke? Ku'er opened her big round eyes and tilted her head, looking at him in confusion. Oh. Jun Moxie flashed back to the study. Young master, excuse me. Why are you blocking my way? Ku'er raised her head. Young master, don't pull my clothes. Young master, you are messing up my hair. Young master, why are you sticking your face to the wall? Are you feeling uncomfortable? So, Jun Moxie angrily ended the wall test. Young master, you are very strange today. Gidge, young master, your posture is very ugly. Ah. Young master, what are you? Don't hit your head against the tree. If you have a headache, I will call a doctor for you. The little lowly was completely scared. Fu*K. Jun Moxie was going crazy. How the hell do I train with this broken thing? Aren't you playing with me? After experimenting hundreds of times, Jun Moxie silently sat down under a big tree in the courtyard. In order to practice this escape technique, Jun Dashao had paid a painful price. At the very least, his forehead was red because he wanted to go through the wall, the top of his head was bumpy like the head of the Buddha. He was experimenting with the escape technique. Leaping high into the air, he fell head first onto the ground, and with a loud thud, he saw stars all around him. His clothes were on fire, and his body was covered in blisters. This was the only result of practicing the escape technique. As for the wind escape technique, cough cough, Jun Dashao didn't know about it for the time being. As for the yin-yang escape technique. Damn it, do I have to go to hell to practice it? If I continue to practice, I might cross over again. Jun Moxie looked at his scarred body with a sad expression. He suddenly lowered his head, and his disheveled hair stuck into his crotch. Then, he rolled on the ground like an egg. Little Ko was scared to death. Grandpa Jun had often been away from home ever since he had handed over his position as the family head to his son, Jun Woo-yi. Moreover, Jun Woo-yi had also learned the art of disguising himself. So, it was impossible to see his shadow. Therefore, the little lowly was left with no choice but to ask Guan Qinghan. Swearing and shedding tears, he finally managed to invite Guan Qinghan over. When Guan Qinghan arrived, she saw Jun Dashao with his head stuck in his crotch. His whole body was bent into a ball, and rolling on the ground. The worst part was that his clothes weren't covering his body. For example, the big hole on his buttocks was very white and dazzling, although the skin was very smooth. Bah, what am I thinking about? What are you doing? Guan Qinghan was a little surprised, and coldly looked at her brother-in-law. Is it fun to abuse yourself? I really don't know what's wrong with this guy. What's wrong with him? Look at him, he's even more artistic than a beggar. Jun Mo Xia raised his head blankly, and mumbled something to himself. His eyes were bloodshot, and he stared at Guan Qinghan for a while. But, it seemed as if he hadn't seen anything. Then, he suddenly held his head in his hands, and started to ponder. Then, he jumped up with a wah-ha sound, and crashed into a tree with a bang sound. Then, he fell back down, and sprawled on the ground. His eyes were looking at the sky, but they were filled with a look of contemplation. Guan Qinghan was angry and amused at the same time. She scolded, "Why are you still not standing up? What kind of behavior is this? You're the only descendant of the third generation of the Jun family." But now, Jun Moxie's mind was completely immersed in the study of the yin-yang escape. Once he was focused, there was no distractions in his mind. To put it nicely, he didn't care about anything around him. But to put it bluntly, he was stubborn, and wouldn't turn back no matter if he hit the wall or not. Even if his head was bleeding, he would continue to hit the wall. How could he hear what Guan Qinghan was saying? He didn't even know that his beautiful sister-in-law, Guan Qinghan, was already in front of him. This was what he was persistent about, and it might also be the reason for his success. No matter what he did, he would concentrate all his energy and intelligence, and do his best. He furrowed his brows and thought hard for a while. Then, he suddenly leaped up and landed on the ground with his head down and feet up, bang! Jun Moxie twitched a few times, and his eyes rolled back. Especially when he couldn't fight back, naturally it was even worse. With a bad thought, he made a prompt decision, and quickly turned to run. Claire jumped to stop Guan Qinghan, but with her insignificant cultivation, how could she stop the raging Guan Qinghan? When Fatty Tang heard the noise outside, he lied on the bed and shouted, "Murder!" Immediately, it was a mess. At this moment, the gatekeeper ran over, "Young master, young madam, Jiang Nan's housekeeper, Lord Guan, and 2 young masters have brought people to visit." Guan Qinghan cried out, and her long sword fell to the ground. Chapter 157. Jiang Nan's housekeeper was from Guan Qinghan's family. However, he didn't know why the housekeeper and his entourage had suddenly come to Tianxiang City at such a time of crisis. Could it be that the housekeeper also wants the level 9 Xian Dan? Jun Moxie frowned slightly. He felt that something was wrong. The capital city had been in chaos for the past 2 days. The day was quiet and peaceful as usual. But every night, the city guards would find several corpses during their patrols. Sometimes, they would even find dozens of corpses. How could such a strange thing not attract the attention of the military of the 5 cities? So, they joined forces with the Ministry of Justice and the city guards to keep a close watch on the movements in the capital city. Several big gangs in the capital city were also getting restless. They were even willing to risk the tight security to commit crimes. This made the investigation even more difficult. As for the results of the investigation, it gave everyone a shock. None of the people who had died were ordinary people. They were all famous figures in Jianghu. Some of them were even at the Earth Xian level. They were all characters who could dominate a region. But now, he had died silently in the capital city. And among the few people who had been investigated, there was no one below the Silver Xian realm. Not a single one. Even the weakest one was at the peak of the Silver Xian realm. Such murders were becoming more and more frequent with the increase in the number of foreigners. This was especially true for the most recent incident, which contained the corpses of members of the Murong family, one of the great families in the capital. As they continued investigating, the leaders of the 5 cities' military office, the city guards army, and the Ministry of Punishment were instantly dumbfounded. The Murong clan was not the only one who had interfered in this matter. The Li clan, the Song clan, and the Meng clan were also involved in this matter. Even though they did not have any direct evidence, the vague momentum was definitely not wrong. Even the 3 princes seemed to be vaguely involved in this matter. How could they investigate? They couldn't investigate until they found out about their own family. Although they didn't dare to investigate further, the 3 officials were muttering in their hearts. Is there going to be a big change? Especially when the envoys from the 2 countries arrived in Tianxiang City. The night in Tianxiang City became even more turbulent. Once night fell, the demons danced wildly as they flew high up in the sky. All kinds of profound energy lights of different colors flew here and there. In the end, the city guards simply found a high place to squat down and enjoy this gorgeous but bloody fireworks show for free. The solitary falcon was walking down the street in a cold and heavy manner. He hadn't come across anyone of the same level as him in the last 2 nights, and although he was somewhat regretful that he hadn't come across anyone of the same level as him, but he was a martial arts fanatic. Therefore, the solitary falcon could be said to be one of the most active people in the city these last 2 nights, and would attack anyone that he came across, regardless of who the other party was or how strong they were. Of course, Solitary Eagle didn't think that he was bullying people. I didn't intend to kill anyone. I only wanted to learn from each other. It's your strength that's too trashy. You can't even take a few of my moves. How can you blame me? Anyone who had fought with him had lost more than half of their life. If they were unlucky and met other groups of people, they basically didn't have the strength to fight back and were one-sidedly slaughtered. Therefore, strange things were happening in Tianxiang City these days. Silver-level Xian Qi practitioners killed gold-level Xian Qi practitioners, and gold-level Xian Qi practitioners killed Yu Xian. It was a complete mess. Solitary Eagle was walking slowly towards a big house. After 2 nights, Solitary Eagle didn't feel that he had gained much. After all, at his level, ordinary low-level Xian Qi practitioners wouldn't be able to give him much inspiration. Therefore, Solitary Eagle locked his target on Earth Xian Qi practitioners. However, if he wanted to find the whereabouts of these people, he would need to have a specialized intelligence network. If he only met them on the road, how long would that take? Therefore, Solitary Eagle was walking coldly towards Tianxiang City's number 1 gang, the Jinyang Gang's headquarters. This was a shortcut. As long as he subdued the Jinyang Gang, he would be able to find the whereabouts of the experts in the Tianxiang City. With the ability of the Prairie's Eagle God, wouldn't it be a piece of cake for him to clean up a local gang? Even if the Jinyang Gang was the number 1 gang in the Tianxiang City, it was still just a Jianghu gang. How could they escape from the hands of the Prairie's Eagle God? Therefore, Solitary Eagle was very confident. In fact, it should be said that he was very confident. Boom! The thick door of the Jinyang Gang suddenly broke into pieces and turned into sawdust. The people who were drinking tea inside were startled and stood up. The Jinyang Gang was the leader of the 6 biggest gangs in the Tianxiang City. Who had the guts to provoke them? Amidst the flying sawdust, a figure slowly walked in. Long hair and black clothes. Tell Jin Feng Lai to come and see me. The solitary falcon's imposing manner was like that of a monarch's, and he sat down in the hall, and didn't even look at the people around him as he began to issue orders. The Jinyang gang might be the leader of the 6 biggest gangs in the Tianxiang capital, and Jin Fenglai was its leader, but in the eyes of the solitary falcon, there wasn't much difference between the Jinyang gang's leader and a common peddler. In fact, the solitary falcon felt that he could kill them at any time, and that the existence of the Jinyang gang was like that of an ant. The members of the Jinyang gang looked at each other in dismay for a moment, but then started shouting and cursing, and rushed forward with their swords and benches clattering against each other. The solitary falcon snorted, stood up, and punched out with both his fists. Suddenly, blood began to flow like the sunset, and the blades began to fly in all directions, and then everything became quiet. At night, Jun Moxie was still obsessed with the yin-yang escape technique. He was still diligently practicing the yin-yang escape technique. However, this one-track-minded killer almost choked himself to death. Ever since Guan Qinghan's kick, Jun Moxia had suddenly understood something. The ancients had a sudden enlightenment, and now that sister-in-law had kicked him, he suddenly had a flash of insight. Since then, Jun Moxia had also recovered from his daze, and had begun to practice with his back to the others. He had forbidden anyone from getting close to him, even Kuer had not been allowed to watch from the side. This was because the yin-yang escape technique was unprecedented. If it caused a sensation, then the news of Jun Moxie practicing this technique would spread faster than any other news. After experimenting several times in the afternoon, Jun Moxie had made great progress. He was able to stay invisible for 3 breaths and move 10 feet. However, these 3 breaths were not to be underestimated. In a fight between experts, life and death could be decided in an instant. Not to mention 3 breaths, even a single breath was enough to kill the enemy 10 times over. Such a result made the hitman Jun extremely happy. His mind heated up, and he started to practice the earth escape technique. The earth escape technique was the stuff of legends. Imagine fighting with an enemy, and then suddenly disappearing without a trace. Then, a long sword would emerge from the ground, and kill the enemy in one fell swoop. How satisfying would that be? So, Jun Moxia gathered his spiritual power, and started chanting the incantation in the courtyard. There was a whooshing sound, and Jun Moxia's shadow really disappeared. But, the problem had also become apparent. He had burrowed himself into the ground, but he couldn't come out. Afraid of failure, Jun Moxie had accumulated his spiritual energy to the brim. In one breath, he had gone several feet into the ground. He knew that he had succeeded, and couldn't help but feel complacent. But when he wanted to come out, he found that there was a problem. He had already exhausted his spiritual energy. It was true that he needed spiritual energy to come in, but he also needed spiritual energy to go out. But now he didn't have any left. What should I do now? What should I do? Stay in the ground. Jun Moxie felt a huge pressure coming from all directions. For the first time, he felt that the earth also had power. But the biggest problem was suffocation. There was no air in the ground. Even if it wasn't a vacuum, it was almost impossible to breathe. That was the real problem. Trying to climb up with brute force? But who knew how deep he had gone? Besides, the Jun family's courtyard's soil wasn't ordinary soil. That day, the Hung Jun pagoda had pressed down the courtyard by 3 feet. It was equivalent to using a 10,000-pound hammer to tamp down the soil. It was estimated that the soil was now stronger than ordinary granite. Trying to use your head to get out? No way. Jun Moxie crazily called for the Hung Jun pagoda. But today, this great god seemed to be in a bad mood. He actually refused to appear. For one day and one night, the Hung Jun pagoda supplied spiritual energy to Jun Moxie to practice the yin-yang escape. This had happened more than 100 times. It was like 2 football fans going to the field. One of them was itching to play, but he still had to pick up the ball and throw it to the other for practice. The other fan, on the other hand, was itching to play, but there was no room for him to play. Could it be that this pagoda also knew how to be angry? Damn it, but don't choose this time to be angry. I'm about to suffocate to death. June Moxie wanted to cry, but no tears came out. He felt the suffocating feeling in his body getting stronger and stronger. His whole body felt like it was congested. His heart was beating faster and faster. It was as if it was about to jump out of his mouth. But he couldn't move his body. The spiritual energy in his body was long gone. He couldn't even move a finger. Could it be that he had to go through another time? But this time, it was too humiliating. It didn't sound good. At this time, June Moxie strangely remembered the day he had gone through another time. He couldn't help but curse in his heart, damn it. Ever since I met you, this damn broken pagoda, I haven't met anything good. In my previous life, I had an earth-shattering divine skill. But, I couldn't move because of you. I could only watch as dozens of guns fired at me and turned me into a sieve. Dozens of grenades were dropped on me and blew me into pieces. Now, I'm paralyzed because of you. I can't move at all. I'm waiting to die from suffocation. It didn't take long for June Moxie to reach the limit of his endurance. He only felt that his head was ringing. He was afraid that he would faint at any time. But, he couldn't faint. He tried to move his dantian countless times, but there was still no movement. There was no reaction. Even his thoughts were muddled. He couldn't think with normal thinking. At this moment, a golden light suddenly flashed in his mind. The Hongjun Pagoda had finally appeared. It was spinning slowly and gracefully. Young Master June didn't even have the strength to curse at this moment. He just waited quietly. Chapter 158. Suddenly, he felt a cooling sensation on his head. It turned out that the Hongjun Pagoda's spiritual energy had surged down in a direct manner, all the way to his dantian, and then swept upwards. June Moxie immediately felt the suffocating feeling disappear. He couldn't help but feel refreshed, and quickly used this new wave of spiritual energy to recover his strength. When he had recovered a third of his strength, he couldn't wait any longer, and quickly used the yin-yang escape technique. Puff! June Moxie finally poked his head out of the ground, and breathed in fresh air. He suddenly felt as if he had come back from the dead, and greedily breathed in. My God, I've never realized that this air is actually so cute and delicious. Panting heavily, June Moxie actually didn't realize that only half of his body had poked out of the ground, and that the lower half of his body was still buried in the soil. Young Master. A high-pitched voice suddenly rang out, and the little lowly Ku'er ran over, crying as she ran. Young Master, what happened to you? Who did this? How could they be so heartless, so immoral, burying a living person? Boo-hoo. June Moxie, I can't possibly tell this little girl that I buried myself, right? That's too shameful. No, even if you beat me to death, I can't say it. Grandaunt, don't shout anymore, you're deliberately letting more people know about this young master's embarrassing matter. After a Herculean effort, he finally convinced the little lowly to stop her surging tears. With great difficulty, June Moxie pulled himself out like a green onion on dry land. His waist hurt, his legs were sore, and there wasn't a single part of his body that didn't feel uncomfortable. This was all solid ground, but there wasn't a single crack. It would be strange if he didn't feel uncomfortable. Although Ku'er was one of his people, the less people who knew about this strange matter, the safer it would be. June Moxie originally wanted to recover his spirit, and once again use the technique. He would be able to pull himself out without any injuries. However, he was accidentally discovered by Ku'er, and June Moxie was in for a tragedy. He couldn't just pull himself out in front of the little lowly with a whoosh, and then leave a hole in the ground, right? Wasn't that too ridiculous? Wouldn't he scare this little girl out of her mind on the spot? If he couldn't keep his mouth shut and blurted it out, then June Sunshao would be in big trouble. After digging a big hole in the ground, June Moxie crawled out in exhaustion. He lay on the ground and groaned. After reminding the little loli not to say anything, Jun Moxie was about to return to his room when suddenly, oh my god. Hitman Jun had never lost so much face in both of his lives. But today was the day he had lost so much face. Third young master, my dearest third young master. Brother Mos, yeah, uncle, my dearest uncle. Where are you, where are you? Come quickly, come quickly. Fatty Tang's cries resounded through the sky like a pig being slaughtered. That kind of intense surprise had already surged to the extreme, like a pervert who hadn't been able to find a wife for 8 lifetimes, suddenly seeing the 7 fairies in the sky bathing in front of him. Jun Moxie nervously pushed open the door to Fatty's room, only to find that Tang Yuan's personal maid was already scared like an old sow sifting chaff, hiding behind the door and trembling incessantly. It was the middle of the night, and Fatty Tang's earth-shattering howl had attracted the attention of the Jun family's patrolling dogs in unison. It was a magnificent sight to behold. Oh God! Fatty Tang continued to chant, his eyes brimming with tears as he looked at Jun Moxie, his body trembling violently to get out of bed. His expression was incomparably excited, his small eyes that were half covered by his fat were miraculously wide open, and his face was radiant with the radiance of pilgrimage. This appearance was like that of a devout Buddhist who had suddenly seen the Buddha appear in front of him. My God! Uncle, lie down quickly. Jun Moxie took 3 steps at a time. If he really let this fatty fall out of bed, he reckoned that this guy would be crippled for the rest of his life. If he let this guy become crippled in his own home, then it would be the same for him. How could Jun Moxie not be anxious? You. Tang Yuan's eyes were brimming with tears, his lips trembling. You what you? Stop, you and me. Jun Moxie squinted his eyes, his anger rising. Fatty, I'll call you big brother, alright? Please don't be so excited, it's already the middle of the night. Even if you don't rest, you have to let others rest. You have some pity on my night patrol dogs, they've been working hard for the whole day, why don't you let them rest? Why are they accompanying you in the middle of the night and excitedly barking? I'm going to fucking die. Tang Yuan stared straight at Jun Moxie, suddenly sobbing. Third young master, I really didn't know that you actually have such a talent, the wisdom to bring peace and stability to the country, the unfathomable schemes, the world-shaking mind, the truly unparalleled genius, the peerless talent, the brilliance of the world. My worship for you is like a surging river, surging wave after wave, like the eternal Tian Fa forest, like the eternal snowy peak that connects the sky, like the eternal surging of the boundless ocean. Fuck me, you really. Stop. The series of flattery made Jun Moxie confused, but at the same time, he felt that he was not being praised. Finally, he used a bit of clarity to stop Fatty Tang's endless chatter. What exactly are you trying to do? This fatty must be plotting something. How am I talented? Although this is the truth, everyone can see that I'm so talented. Even a fatty like you can see that I'm just an introvert. This business plan. Fatty Tang's hands trembled as he pinched a few pieces of paper in his hands. Was it really written by you? You didn't hire a gunman? Jun Moxie nodded his head in confusion. Yes, why? Why would I hire a gunman for this? There was really no need to hire a gunman. In his previous life, Jun Dashao was the king of assassins. As he often needed to disguise his identity, he still needed to master some basic knowledge, such as the business plan given to Fatty. That business plan was not considered top-notch. Perhaps any graduate from a famous business university would be more outstanding than Jun Dashao. It was just some simple ideas. If it was too in-depth, he would not be able to write it out. Is there a need for this? What's wrong? You're asking me what's wrong? Tang Yuan was inexplicably excited. He got carried away and grabbed Jun Moxie's hand, holding it with all his might. Master, please accept a bow from your disciple. No, master, please accept me as your disciple. It's not a problem to be your disciple. Ugh. I'm too excited. Jun Mo suddenly felt as if his hands had been wrapped in a thick sponge. He hastily tried to pull his hands out, but Fatty used all his strength to resist. Jun Mo's physical strength was at its lowest point. So, he couldn't pull his hands out no matter what. Then, he heard Fatty plead with tears in his eyes, Master, Master, please be merciful, and accept me as your disciple. Fatty, if you keep acting like this, do you believe I'll throw you into the pigsty alive? Just let go of me. Jun Moxie threatened fiercely, then scratched his head in confusion. This plan, could it be that there's something good about it? Could it be that there's really a saying that when a protagonist casually comes up with something, there will be lackeys crying and begging to hug his thighs? Fatty Tang reluctantly let go of his hands, but when he heard this, he immediately glared and shouted with dissatisfaction, "What do you mean by, there's something good about it? There should be a limit to boasting, even though this is obviously the ultimate treasure of business. It's a huge invention that has never been seen or heard of before. It's a treasure that is worthy of any businessman in the world to worship, study and study diligently for the rest of their lives. But you have to be humble, only then can you have the demeanor of a grandmaster in the business world." As he spoke, Fatty Tang became excited again. Huh? Is it really that good? Jun Moxie was really doubtful. How did I become a business guru of my generation? After all, he had never really done business before. At most, he was just pretending to be a businessman. This information was only what he had heard and seen in his previous life. He had scribbled down everything that he could think of. He was prepared to let Fatty Tang use his discretion, but he didn't have much assurance in his heart. He didn't expect that Fatty Tang would actually hold it in such high esteem, which was unexpected. Hitman Jun had obviously ignored the limitations of the two eras he had experienced, and the comparability of the business world. It's scary to have no knowledge. But it's even scarier to have advanced knowledge. Tang Yuan took 2 deep breaths, and then grimaced in pain. His previous torment had already affected his wounds, but he was too excited before, so he didn't feel it. Now that he had calmed down, he naturally felt it. Fatty said with a bitter face, "Third young master, quickly look at my butt, is it bleeding? It hurts a lot." Blarg. Jun Moxie retched, "Damn it, I'm not looking. In case you spray it again, this young master still needs to keep this face of mine to pick up girls." Tang Yuan was both angry and amused at the same time. He felt pained and embarrassed at the same time. Motherfucker. Do you think you can just spit it out whenever you want? I didn't take any medicine today, and I didn't even eat anything. Jun Moxie straightened out his wounds, and said in a serious tone, "Fatty, seriously speaking, can this idea really be used? Believe me. This is absolutely the golden rule of all businessmen in the world. It's full of wonderful ideas that have never been seen before. As long as we follow the instructions, and at most make some slight changes, you and I will definitely become the richest people in the continent." Tang Yuan pointed to the sky and swore, "Third young master, as long as you have the goods, I, Tang Yuan, will open shops all over the continent. Damn it, even if it's the Xian beasts in the Tian Fa forest, as long as they have the money, I can open a shop there." That's good. Jun Moxie exhaled, "In the future, I won't care about this. When you recover, you'll be responsible for everything, remember, as long as it's business matters, whether it's looking for people, buying land, building, hiring, opening shops, keeping secrets, etc. Don't look for me for anything. I'm really not interested in this stuff. Don't worry, I understand. When a master reaches the peak, he will not want to experience a journey without an opponent again. I really understand. This time, I, Tang Yuan, will do it for you. Gold and silver will roll in, just wait and see." Tang Yuan was full of confidence. As he spoke, his eyes focused on the papers again, and he was full of praise as he looked at them. "Then I'm going to sleep, I still have things to do tomorrow. June Moxie said tentatively. Go away, go away. Don't disturb my mood. This is good stuff. Tang Yuan waved his hand, as if he was shooing away a fly, his eyes still fixed on the papers. Damn it. Just now you said you wanted to worship me as your master, and now this attitude. You disobedient disciple who deceives your master. June Moxie scolded angrily, but there was no response. Tang Yuan's attention was completely not on him now. Chapter 159. Although he had gone through a lot of trouble, June Moxie was pleasantly surprised to find that the qi in his body had increased by a lot. Even the yin-yang escape technique could support him for a few more breaths of time. However, the thing that made June Moxie the most pleasantly surprised was that he had realized something through this incident. No matter how powerful the Hongjun Pagoda was, it was only the Hongjun Pagoda, and not June Moxie. The most reliable thing was still his own strength. Therefore, it was most important not to rely on external things, but to focus on improving his own strength. Tomorrow afternoon was the appointed time of 3 days, and June Moxie still needed to make some preparations. Therefore, after activating the Hongjun Pagoda to repair his body, June Moxie went straight to the wine warehouse, and fiddled with it for a long time. Under the boundless night sky, Jun Wui was wearing a mask, and his entire body was bathed in blood as he jumped over the wall of a big house in the capital. He looked at the group of boys and girls who were supporting each other as they walked away, and his eyes were full of gratification. One mustn't misunderstand. The third Master Jun's current strength had allowed him to bathe in blood. However, he had bathed in the blood of other people. So, how could there be any experts guarding these filthy places? So, it was easy for him to move around. The big house behind him was full of corpses. This was the third stronghold that he had destroyed since he regained his ability to move around. Now, Jun Wui completely agreed with June Moxie's words. Some people disregard the law, and are inhuman. For this, we can only kill them. Cut the weeds and eliminate the roots, and use violence to control violence, that is the right way. If they had not carefully investigated and secretly followed him, who would have thought that the home of this wealthy man, who had a good reputation, was actually such a filthy place? During the first operation, Jun Wui had held back, and only injured the people inside, and did not kill them. Then, he had anonymously sent a message to the city guards, asking them to detain these people, and enforce the law. Who would have thought that in just one day, those people would disappear from the dungeon without a trace? Jun Wui asked around and found out that these people had been taken to a secret place to recuperate. They were served with delicacies and precious herbs every day. In a fit of rage, Jun Wui rushed in and killed everyone. From then on, Jun Tri-Leaf learned his lesson. Since the law couldn't punish him, he would enforce justice on behalf of the heavens with his sword. Let me represent the moon, represent the heavens to punish him. With a cold smile, Jun Wui rose up and disappeared in a flash, leaving behind a pale blue light. In another corner of the capital, a man in blue sat cross-legged on a bed with his eyes lowered, not saying a word. In front of him was a heavily injured black-clothed man wrapped in countless bandages. Brother, if it wasn't for the fact that I have no other choice, I wouldn't have come to beg you. You came to Tianxiang City from thousands of miles away, and not only did I not treat you well, but I also made you wade into these muddy waters. I feel very guilty. But brother, if you didn't help me, I'm afraid that my life's work would have been gone without a trace. The black-clothed man who was speaking was the leader of Tianxiang City's #1 underground gang, the Jinyang Gang's leader, Jin Feng Lai. After Solitary Eagle had wreaked havoc in the Jinyang Gang, the leader of the Jinyang Gang had been defeated by him in less than 3 moves. And this was because Solitary Eagle had been lenient, otherwise, his head would have been twisted off in the first move. For a person who stood at the peak of the world to deal with a gang leader, it was not even worth mentioning. Even if it was the #1 gang in the Tianxiang Empire, it would still be the same. Jin Fenglai was at the middle stage of the Earth Xian realm. Perhaps he was already an unreachable existence in the eyes of ordinary people, but in the eyes of a spirit Xian expert, he was only a slightly larger ant. After that, Solitary Eagle proposed the surrender of the Jin Yang gang, and deliberately gave Jin Fenglai 2 days to consider. As far as the Solitary Falcon was concerned, it was only a matter of time before the Jin Yang gang would surrender to him, but if Jin Fenglai could find a strong enough expert to help him, then that would be a good thing. Therefore, he didn't reveal his identity to the Solitary Falcon. Otherwise, with Solitary Eagle's status, he would be giving face to the Jin Yang gang and Jin Fenglai. Unfortunately, Jin Fenglai didn't know. Brother Jin, you said you only took 3 moves from him. The blue-robed man's face was handsome, and he looked to be about 40 years old. His face was calm. 3 moves. Do you know that even if it isn't difficult for me to defeat you with my current cultivation, it won't be easy for me to defeat you within 3 moves? This man's Xian skills are above mine, maybe even far beyond mine. Brother Hai, don't tell me, you. Jin Fenglai was tongue-tied, but the words "don't tell me you don't care" were stuck in his throat. The blue-robed man stood up, and paced back and forth in the room. His blue robe was flowing like the sea, and as he walked, he felt as if the waves of the sea were rolling away. But now, the blue-robed man's heart was bursting with annoyance. He had been stuck at the peak of the sky-profound realm for more than 10 years, and had never been able to break through. This time, he had also heard the news about the peak of level 9 Xian core. Although he knew that there was not much hope, but he still held on to that tiny bit of hope. He had traveled day and night, hoping that he could get lucky. Who knew that he would encounter such a troublesome matter as soon as he arrived? The blue-robed man's name was Hai Chenfeng, and he was a freak of the seas. He was temperamental, and only acted according to his heart. He was always free and unrestrained. It was difficult to distinguish between good and evil. More than 10 years ago, Hai Chenfeng had come to Tianxiang City, and had a conflict with someone. That person was an expert from the Yu family. Although Hai Chenfeng was defeated, he was besieged by several people from the Yu family, and was eventually seriously injured. If not for Jin Fenglai's help, this freak would have already stepped on the road to the Yellow Springs. Hai Chenfeng was a man who knew how to repay kindness. In just 1 year, he had helped Jin Fenglai expand the influence of the Jin Yang gang from a small gang to become the #1 gang in Tianxiang City, and then floated away. The reason why they had come to the Tianxiang City to participate in the competition for the level 9 Xian core, even though they knew that there were a lot of experts in the city, was because they wanted to rely on the Jin Yang gang. After all, the Jin Yang gang had deep roots in Tianxiang City, and they were well informed. If the Jin Yang gang were to help him, then his chances of seizing the Xian Dan would naturally increase. However, he didn't expect that the Jin Yang gang would come to him first before he could even ask for help from the Jin Yang gang. Hai Chenfeng felt extremely depressed for a moment. He couldn't help but ask himself, is Tianxiang City a forbidden place for me, Hai Chenfeng? I can't even set foot in here. If not, then why is there such a big trouble waiting for me every time I come here? According to Jin Fenglai, the strength of the mysterious black-robed man was at least above his own, and perhaps even stronger. What should I do? He paced back and forth, feeling more and more depressed. He raised his head, and sighed inwardly. He had already made a decision. Forget it. I, Hai Chenfeng, am not the kind of person who doesn't repay kindness. A real man should die. He raised his head, looked at Jin Fenglai, and spoke in a gentle voice, Brother Jin, please tell that man that I, Hai Chenfeng, will be waiting for him in the southern forest in 3 days. Thank you, Brother Hai. Jin Fenglai was overjoyed. I knew that you wouldn't just stand by and watch. Over the years, Jin Fenglai had been very confident in Hai Chenfeng, and had never failed in anything that Hai Chenfeng had handled. The reason why he had dragged the solitary eagle along this time was because Hai Chen-feng was in Tianxiang City at the moment. Jin Fenglai firmly believed that no matter how powerful the black-robed man was, he could not be stronger than the invincible Hai Chen-feng. Jin Fenglai was even thinking about where he should celebrate Hai Chen-feng's victory. Ignorance was truly terrifying. One could easily lose one's life, and that of one's family and friends. He didn't even consider that Hai Chen-feng was not invincible. He didn't know that Hai Chen-feng's heart was filled with bitterness at the moment. The battle with the mysterious black-robed man bodes ill rather than well. I believe that even if I win by luck, I'm afraid that it will be a Pyrrhic victory, and I'm afraid that I won't have the strength to fight for the Xian Dan. But I can't not repay the kindness of saving my life. Let me do one last thing for the Jinyang gang. Regardless of the outcome of this matter, I, Hai Chen-feng, will immediately leave Tianxiang City, and will never return. Brother Hai, by the way, did you come to Tianxiang City for the matter of the level 9 Xian Dan? Jin Fenglai said excitedly, once this matter is settled, I will immediately arrange for the whole gang to investigate. Haha, to tell you the truth, I had already guessed your intentions when I received the news of your arrival. Therefore, I had already made the necessary arrangements. Jin Fenglai smiled and said, with the help of Brother Hai and the entire Jinyang gang, I believe that obtaining the level 9 Xian Dan will not be difficult. No. You're wrong, I didn't come here for the level 9 Xian Dan. Hai Chen-feng slowly shook his head, and a trace of bitterness flashed in his eyes. It's been 10 years since we last met, and I've missed you very much. Therefore, I came to visit Brother Jin, and I will go into closed-door training once I return. Since I've already anticipated the dangers of this trip, how can I let you get involved in this? I'll bear all the pain and consequences alone. So that's how it is. Jin Fenglai couldn't help but feel sad. Then. I don't know when I will see you again, brother. This time, you should stay for 2 more days, and we will have a good reunion. Perhaps the next time we meet will be when you will have a breakthrough in your Xian Qi cultivation. Chapter 160. Ah. Jin Fenglai stood up in spite of his injuries. How can this be? Why not? Brother Jin, you don't need to be present in the fight 3 days from now. Hai Chen-feng turned around and said in a low voice, I will deal with the black-robed man alone. This matter is settled. Haha, if you see me die on the spot, won't you rush out and risk your lives? That would only increase the number of casualties needlessly. If you hear about my death or defeat from someone else's mouth, perhaps you won't feel so bad if you don't witness it with your own eyes? I, Hai Chen-feng, can only do this much for you after many years of friendship. Hai Chen-feng spoke in a resolute and decisive manner, turned to face the wall, and sat down cross-legged without making another sound. Brother Hai. Jin Fenglai called out, suddenly feeling an infinitely heavy feeling in his heart. For the first time, he had some misgivings in his heart. Was it right or wrong to ask for Brother Hai's help? Will Brother Hai be in danger? He had always been confident in Hai Chen-feng's victory, so he hadn't been worried before. He had always felt that as long as Hai Chen-feng was willing to help, everything would be fine. It had never occurred to him that Brother Hai, whom he regarded as a god, would fail. Hai Chen-feng didn't speak again. Jin Fenglai sighed in a low voice, and withdrew with a heavy heart. Jun Moxie woke up, and felt that there was something strange in the courtyard. He put on his clothes and went out. The sky was just beginning to brighten. More than 200 men were neatly lined up in the small courtyard. Each and every one of them had their bodies perfectly straight. When they saw that Jun Xia had come out of the door, they uniformly shouted in unison, "Young master, we've returned." Jun Moxie smiled as he looked at these 200 strong men patrolling one by one, and secretly nodded in his heart. These men's long-lost battle spirit had been completely restored. Their bodies, in addition to the valiant and iron-blooded temperament of soldiers, now had a bloodthirsty aura similar to that of wild beasts. And June Moxie wanted them to have this aura as their first step. "How's the result?" June Moxie asked with a smile. Reporting to young master, during this training trip, a total of 300 people left the courtyard. 27 people left the team midway. In the Tian Fa forest, 19 people lost their lives, and a total of 46 people died. The rest of the 254 people were all here. Among them, 130 of them had broken through the 9th grade and reached the Silver Xian initial stage. 84 of them had advanced to the Silver Xian intermediate stage. 36 of them had reached the Silver Xian peak stage. 4 of them had broken through to the Gold Xian Qi. The mission of hunting Xian beasts that young master gave us before we left has been completed. A large man stepped out from the crowd and reported in a loud voice. His voice was filled with unconcealable excitement. They knew that this was a huge improvement for them. "Very good." June Moxie praised, "You did better than I expected." Over the past few days, did anyone feel the changes in their bodies? Are you different from before? The moment June Moxie's words came out, the 200-plus people immediately laughed in embarrassment. Thinking back to the time when they were idling around in the June family, how could they have imagined that they would actually improve so much? And this kind of progress was all forced out by this young master in front of him time and time again through deathly training. Compared to the time when they were in the June family's courtyard, their strength had more than doubled. Remember, everyone's achievements are forced out of them. As long as you continue to force yourself, your body will have endless potential to be unearthed. Even a coward can become a warrior. But if you don't force yourself to be ruthless, you can only be like rotten wood, slowly rotting. Even a warrior will become more timid than a coward. June Moxie said in a low voice, "Are your current achievements really that high? Let me tell you, this is only the beginning for you. Because your current highest achievement is only gold level Xian Qi, but there are so many jade level, earth Xian Qi, Tian Xian, and Supreme Shen Xian in the world. They can force themselves to such a high level, and I find it strange that you can't do the same. Humans have 2 eyes and 1 mouth. Supreme Shen Xian is not a monster with 3 heads and 6 arms. So, the road in front of you is still very long, and very long. Haste makes waste. You don't need to look too far ahead now. You just need to push yourselves harder every day. One day, you'll realize that you've unknowingly reached a new height that you've never dreamed of before. Yes. We will follow the young master's instructions." Everyone's face turned solemn. Before they received the young master's training, they did not pay much attention to him. Everyone had been bewildered after the training. But, they had followed his instructions to the letter. Moreover, they had strictly followed his instructions in the forest. Therefore, they had managed to avoid disaster several times. Therefore, these 254 people had been thoroughly convinced by June Moxie. "Go and look for the 3rd uncle, and see how he will arrange your duties." June Moxie waved his hand. "Young master," several burly men stepped forward, looking a little excited. "We also know that we may not be qualified, but—" "Young master, can you let us follow you? The 3rd uncle will arrange it." June Moxie smiled. He was very sure that June Wui would definitely assign all these people to him. Because this was already a tacit understanding between uncle and nephew. And now, he really needed such a force. This was the reason. Tang Yuan's snores were still earth-shattering, and he occasionally let out 1 or 2 sounds. "Ah! My butt hurts." This kind of sound was followed by such snores. June Moxie could not help but admire this fatty's thoughtlessness. It had really reached an extraordinary level. The sun had just risen when June Wui slowly entered June Moxie's small courtyard in his wheelchair. 3rd Master June felt that June Moxie's courtyard was very different from his own. Just the flatness of the ground was much better. After experiencing great joy and sorrow, Jun Wooyi didn't feel much about sitting in a wheelchair. After all, he could stroll around at night, and even during the day, if he wanted to go out, he could just change his appearance and go out. It seemed that nothing would hinder him. Sitting in a wheelchair for the last few days had given Jun Wooyi a sense of pleasure. Jun Wooyi couldn't help but feel a little satisfied. "You can make your own arrangements for those people," Third Master Jun said. "I am very busy." "Busy with killing people?" Jun Moxie keenly sensed a familiar scent from Jun Wooyi. He squinted his eyes and smiled. "Third uncle, you are too mean. Last night, you went out to eat alone and did not call me?" Jun Wooyi was startled. He raised his head and could not help but laugh. "After I came back, I had already cleaned up." "You little brat, how did you know?" Killing people is not only a physical work, but also a work of the heart and mind. Jun Moxie smiled amusedly. When killing people, it must be because of anger, sorrow, hatred, and righteous indignation. Therefore, to kill someone, one must damage the mind. This is actually similar to using too much anger to damage the liver. After killing people, the hostility will not dissipate, and the body's temperament will naturally be different from usual. Even a valiant general cannot avoid it. This is an extremely important reason why very few people can reach the peak of Xian Qi. Jun Mo Xia smiled coldly. "So, after killing someone, you must quickly tidy up your mind and do something that you find enjoyable to do. You must let your mind completely relax. Only then will you be able to get rid of the evil aura and influence of killing someone. Drinking is a good way to do this. That's why most martial artists are addicted to alcohol. In fact, soldiers are the same. So, just taking a bath and changing clothes is far from enough." Jun Moxie squinted his eyes. "However, besides me, I believe there may not be many people in this world who can see it. Third uncle, you can rest assured." Ha ha ha, Jun Wooyi's face turned red. He was worried about this problem, but Jun Moxie was silent. "Ignorant child, how dare you make fun of this old man?" Jun Moxie looked up at the sky and laughed. "Third uncle, you should save this old man for my third aunt. This nephew's teeth ache just from hearing it." This was from the bottom of his heart and was not an exaggeration. Not to mention Jun Dashao, anyone who knew Jun Dashao would also feel their teeth ache. Although Jun Dashao had been crippled for 10 years, his foundation was excellent. His Xian Qi had never slacked off. Over the past 10 years, there was almost no vicissitudes left on his face. Although Jun Dashao was in his 30s, he looked like a 27 or 28-year-old man. Coupled with his excellent foundation, he was definitely an elegant young man with a bit of steadiness and elegance that only a middle-aged man would have. For such a person to suddenly call himself an old man, would you not feel your teeth ache? Jun Wooyi did not know whether to laugh or cry. As long as there is a junior in the family, you can call yourself an old man. Don't you understand such a simple principle? So, if I have a niece or nephew, I can also call myself an old man? Jun Moxie deliberately made things difficult. "I'm only 16 years old." "Of course you can." Jun Wooyi replied in a serious manner. How could such a crappy argument be justified? This world was truly crazy. Jun Moxie fainted and fell to the ground. A 16-year-old can call himself an old man? God, please let me die, this is even more shocking than the heavenly thunder. Is there anything important in the afternoon? Jun Wooyi smiled warmly. "Remember to come back early, there will be a family banquet tonight to entertain the Guan family, and to welcome them." "Third uncle, what are they here for?" Jun Moxie took the opportunity to ask. Based on the current situation, there should be only 2 goals. The first is naturally the 9th level Xian Dan. The second is to bring your sister-in-law back. They have already revealed this second point. Jun Wooyi smiled faintly. Qinghan staying in our Jun family has greatly damaged her reputation. So, if Qinghan decides to return home, our Jun family must compensate her. The divorce document is essential, but we must also add something else. For example, we must announce it to the world. That way, we won't let down that child for the rest of her life. He only sent Tian Xian flying with a kick but did not injure him at all. This fully demonstrated the strength of Tian Xian's master. Jun Moxie took out the black object from his bosom and smiled mysteriously. It was a 6th-level Xian beast's Xian Dan. The sun was setting in the west, and it was already the afternoon of the next day. Jun Moxie carried 2 jars of wine and sat in the carriage that he hated the most, a palanquin. He wobbled all the way to Old Song's tavern. At this time, Old Song's tavern was already full of anxious people. Old Song had originally planned to open for half a day, but after thinking about it, he decided to close the tavern for the entire day. He directly put up a sign and closed the tavern. In any case, one day of business wouldn't make much of a difference. Then he began to tidy up the tavern in preparation for the competition in the afternoon. Competing in drinking was one of Old Song's greatest pleasures in his life. This was not just one of the pleasures, but the only one. That kind of excitement was far more intense than when he fought against an expert of the same level. Although he did not know if the little demon could really bring a heavenly wine that was 100 times better than his, he could not help but be filled with anticipation. Although he was convinced that there was no such thing as a heavenly wine in this world, but since the little demon dared to boast, even if the wine he brought wasn't as good as he claimed, it was still enough to make him look forward to it. In the morning, the originally dirty tavern had unexpectedly become clean and spotless. The snow-white wall cloth covered the surroundings and even the roof. It hung all the way to the ground. On the ground, there was an additional layer of light green carpet. The tables and stools that were missing arms and legs were all swept away. In their place were 2 long tables made of high-quality white jade. In addition, there were also several good-quality rosewood chairs arranged neatly. On the tables, there were 24 white jade wine cups stacked together in the shape of a steeple. There were 2 of them, and a total of 48 cups. At the corners of the walls hung a string of pearls the size of pigeon eggs. The pearls hung from the top to the bottom, emitting a gentle radiance that was reflected and refracted by the white jade tables and white jade wine glasses. The entire tavern was filled with gorgeous and dazzling colors. Anyone who entered this tavern would inevitably feel as if they had stepped into a dreamy paradise. That day, the middle-aged man excitedly stepped into the tavern. Suddenly, he cried out in surprise and withdrew his foot. He looked around suspiciously. That's right. This is the location of Old Song's tavern. How did it suddenly become even cleaner and more luxurious than my prince's mansion? This place is no longer the shabby tavern of the past. It can even be said to be a paradise in heaven, or a paradise on earth, right? Old Song hurriedly came over to greet the middle-aged man. Only then did the middle-aged man walk in hesitantly. As he looked around, he clicked his tongue in wonder. Old Song, you are too strange. Today is called a drinking competition, but in the end, isn't it just 2 cups of wine? Is there a need to make it so serious? This prince is so scared that he doesn't dare to come in. This Old Song knows his true identity. In front of him, there is no need to worry too much. You can't say that. Wine may be a small matter to others, but to me, it is the most important thing in the world. Moreover, I have a hunch that this drinking competition will be the kind of fight that I've always dreamed of. Or perhaps, it will be the most precious memory of my life. Old Song solemnly said. Song Shang. So you are Song Shang. The Song Shang who toasted the king with a cup of wine, but sent the king with a body full of wounds. The prince was surprised. Then, he smiled and said, but why are you not hiding your identity in front of me today? Is there any meaning in continuing to hide it? Song Shang smiled bitterly. 3 days ago, the black-robed man had already exposed his identity. So, what was there to hide? Even if he continued to hide it, it was pointless. If it wasn't for today's drinking competition, Old Song would have closed the tavern 3 days ago and found another place to hide. It is said that Song Shang was a handsome and elegant man. He has a strange habit. Before killing someone, he must give them a cup of wine. He is known as the wine gentleman. Sending a cup of wine to the king, urging the king to go to the Yellow Springs. But for what reason did Brother Song become like this? The prince asked with a smile. The past is unbearable. There is no point in mentioning it. Song Shang shook his head. His eyes were filled with bitterness. The prince tactfully didn't continue to ask. At his side, there was a 10-year-old boy. The boy was as cute as a porcelain doll. In front of strangers, the boy tried his best to maintain a calm and graceful appearance. But secretly, a small hand was tightly gripping the prince's clothes. This is my son, Yang Imo, the prince stroked the boy's head with a loving expression. His bones are good. A faint voice said. The prince and Song Shang turned their heads at the same time. They saw that the black-robed man had silently appeared on a chair. His expression was calm, as if he didn't see the earth-shattering change in the tavern. Thank you for your praise. With the prince's eyesight, he naturally knew that this black-robed man was not ordinary. He was most likely one of the legendary figures. Otherwise, the peerless assassin Song Shang wouldn't be so afraid of him. The prince didn't take his cold words to heart. Chapter 162. Jun Mo Xia laughed, and didn't speak any more nonsense. He waved his hand, and the two warriors behind him carried a jug of wine, and gently placed it on the table. Suddenly, the three of them focused their attention on the 2 jugs of wine. Only this much? Only 2 small jugs? The prince was a little disappointed. 2 jugs is too little. Jun Moxie rolled his eyes. 10,000 taels of silver for a jug. These 2 jugs are worth 20,000 taels of silver. I can't even drink for free. 10,000 taels of silver for a jug. Song Laosan snorted, I have never heard of a wine that is worth 10,000 taels of silver for a jug. Just the price alone is 100 or even 1,000 times more than the price of this Song's wine. This time, I've really broadened my horizons. His words were said with a hint of sarcasm in them. Frog at the bottom of a well, how can you know the vastness of the Milky Way? You are the one who has seen the world. Jun Moxie said without any trace of politeness. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and start, we still have things to do when we get back. I haven't even said that this wine is actually blended. My wine should be worth 10,000 taels of silver for a cup. The 3 of them saw this brat's overbearing attitude and couldn't help but get angry. The black-robed Lady Lengleng snorted and looked at the jug of wine. The aroma of the wine is only so, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is good. Who is good and who is bad, we will only know after tasting it. How can we know the quality of the wine before tasting it? Jun Moxie also snorted coldly. The 3 of them sat down angrily. The 2 judges had already made up their minds. If the 2 wines are about the same, or even if this brat's wine is slightly better, they will still give Song Laosan the victory. Let's see how arrogant this brat is. A small jug of wine costs 10,000 taels of silver. Why don't you just rob the treasury? Ah. Why is there a little girl here? Jun Moxie looked at little Yang Imo in surprise and praised, not bad. Beautiful eyebrows and phoenix eyes. In the future, when you ask for my hand in marriage, you will definitely break the threshold. TSK. I'm a man, a man. Little Yang Imo was so angry that he forgot his shyness and let go of the hem of his father's clothes. He clenched his fists tightly and glared fiercely at June Moxie with his black and white eyes. His voice was filled with Tong Rui's voice. Really? Why can't I tell? You don't even have an Adam's apple. Even the voice is a girl's. June Moxie shook his head and squinted at him. Why don't you take off your pants to prove it? This was obviously bullying. It would be strange if such a young child had an Adam's apple. I'm really a man. The little fellow clutched the waistband of his trousers tightly, his little face flushed red. He was very afraid that this shameless strange uncle would come over and pull off his trousers. Let's say you are a man. June Moxie giggled. Come, little girl, watch me compete with your grandfather in drinking. He pointed at Wang Ye. I'm a man. The little guy screamed again. Besides, that's my father. Pfft. The few of them laughed at the same time and rocked back and forth. June Moxie also laughed and rubbed his hair. Okay. Didn't I say that you are a man? Is that okay? Okay. The little fellow didn't notice the other meaning in June Moxie's words. He whispered in June Moxie's ear, if you still don't believe me, I'll take off my pants and show you my D**CK when there's no one around. June Moxie was left dumbstruck. He had been defeated. Although the little fellow spoke softly, which one of the people present didn't have a keen sense of hearing? Even if the little guy's voice had been 10 times softer, they would have still been able to hear him. So, they couldn't help but burst into laughter. June Moxie's teasing made everyone feel as if the distance between them had been shortened by a lot. June Moxie secretly smiled in his heart. Amusing a child. Although the hitman had lived 2 lives, he had never done such a thing before. But he was using this method to make everyone laugh and liven up the atmosphere. Then after the drinking competition, wouldn't it be easier to talk about anything? However, no matter how strong an expert was, it would be useless to argue with a child. Looking at a mysterious master and a Tian Xian master, June Moxie felt that he would be letting himself down if he didn't make use of this opportunity. Old Song carefully came out of the inner room, holding 2 jars of wine as if they were treasures. There was a thick layer of dust on top of these jars, and no one knew how long they had been there. In order to be fair, since you only brought 2 jars of wine, then I will also bring 2 jars. Old Song was somewhat proud of himself. These 2 jars of wine had been brewed when he was in the prime of his life. He had used the best fruits and spring water to brew these 2 jars of wine. This wine was brewed when I was 28 years old. Back then, I was in the prime of my life. I traveled from the snowy peaks to the north, to the glaciers to the south, to the drifting clouds to the east, and to the Pengduan Mountains to the west. I spent 5 years collecting more than 30 types of exotic flowers and fruits, then mixed it with the essence of the 5 grains and water from the snowy peaks to brew it. Song Shang's hand rested on the jars of wine as he spoke with a sad expression on his face. After I brewed this wine, I suffered a series of major changes, and was unable to recover. I hid in Tianxiang, and never came out again. At that time, I was only able to brew these 2 jars of wine, and was not willing to drink them. These 2 jars of wine can be regarded as the pinnacle of my life. As he said this, the prince and the black-robed man, Solitary Eagle, became even more interested. For 5 years, you searched all over the world, just to brew a dozen jars of wine. Solitary Eagle shook his head. If it were me, I would never have been able to do it. Just this point alone makes this wine worth drinking. Worth drinking? Ha! Song Shang's smile was very strange, and there was a feeling of sadness in his heart. I have been wholeheartedly making this world's best wine for a few years, and the world has changed for me. Well said, the quality of the wine is indeed secondary. Just this persistence is worthy of praise. June Moxie applauded. However, persistence is not synonymous with success. In the end, the quality of the wine needs to be judged by the taster's objective opinion. The 3 glared at the same time. Jun Dashao's words had offended all three of them. Persistence is not synonymous with success, and he was clearly saying that this wine was not the best wine. What objective opinion? Was he clearly saying that the judge would be biased? Solitary Eagle Lenglang looked at him. Just a moment ago, he was somewhat pleasing to the eye, but now he suddenly felt that he was very annoying. He actually dared to disagree with this old man, and even dared to question this old man's judgment. He could not help but say coldly, "Young man, are you saying that persistence is not important? Let me ask you, since ancient times, when successful people, whose deeds have been passed down for thousands of years, which one of them was not particularly persistent? Success isn't something that can be determined by just talking. Although persistence is important, it depends on whether persistence is worth it." Jun Moxie was not the slightest bit afraid, and said coldly, "Having confidence and being able to succeed, this is called admirable. However, if you know that there is no hope and still persist, then you are the number one fool in the world." That's right, since ancient times, all successful people have a special characteristic, and that is persistence. Once they have identified a goal, they will not look back, and they will work hard all the way, and finally create their own world. And their stories will be passed down for generations. For example, in terms of conquering the mainland, our Tian Xiang's founding emperor, Yang Kai Tian, in terms of Xian cultivation, such examples can be found everywhere. However, what Senior said just now was very reasonable. Success or failure was not something that could be determined by words alone. I believe that any famous Xian cultivation master does not rely on words alone. Xian cultivation master, oh. Do you know which Xian cultivation masters? Solitary Eagle had piqued his interest. There are 8 Xian cultivation masters in the world, and they are very famous. It would be hard not to know of them, right? The number 1 is the elusive Supreme Eagle, Yunbi Chen, who is accompanied by a level 9 Xian beast, and his cultivation has been rumored to be at the peak of Supreme Shenxians. He is free and unfettered, but every time he appears in the world, something earth-shattering will happen. That's right. Solitary Eagle nodded slowly. The prince and Song Shang heard the name, Supreme Eagle, Yunbi Chen, and their faces were filled with awe. Yunbi Chen had indeed become a legend. An immortal existence. The second one is the great master Li Ju Tian. He does as he pleases, and does not distinguish between good and evil. He is vicious and merciless, but his cultivation is at the peak of Xian cultivation. No one can doubt this, and I believe that no one would dare to. The number 3 is the mysterious master of the Silver Blizzard City, Han Feng Shui. Jun Mo Xia had mentioned the Silver Blizzard City, and the solitary falcon's face had slightly twitched in response. The 4th is the Heavens Equal Peaks Freak, Mo Wentian. Jun Mo Xia saw his reaction, but continued to speak without batting an eyelid. This person is said to be from Tian Xiang. The number 5 is Supreme Lei Wu Bei. The 6th is the Grand Master of the Shenxia Empire, who is rumored to be Mo Wen Tian's archenemy, the life and death supremacy Shi Chang Shao. This person is currently in Tian Xiang City. Jun Moxie smiled coldly. The number 7 is Supreme Meng Hong Chen, who lives in seclusion in the Blue Sea. As for the number 8, hee. Jun Moxie smiled calmly, it's hard to say. What's so hard to say? Solitary Eagle raised his eyebrows, and looked at Jun Moxie with a cold gaze. It's just a name. Is it hard to say? The number 8 should be tied by 2 people in the eyes of the world. Jun Moxie smiled mysteriously. Solitary Eagle of the Grasslands and Feng Wanyun of the Fierce Gale Swordsman have been fighting for the number 8 position for half their lives, and have yet to determine a winner. That's why I said that the number 8 position will be shared between the 2 of them. What do you mean by no winner? That Feng Wanyun was not even worth mentioning, it was just an undeserved reputation. What qualifications does he have to be compared with the divine eagle of the grasslands? Solitary Eagle snorted twice. Senior's words make sense. I heard that Solitary Eagle often goes to the Great Snowy Mountains to practice his martial arts, and fights with thousands of vultures. If this rumor is true, then the tenacity of the divine eagle of the grasslands is commendable. June Moxie's face was heavy, but there was a hint of worship in it. From this point of view, Solitary Eagle indeed has the qualifications to be above Feng Wanyun. He is worthy of being called the supreme master of the grasslands. Solitary Eagle couldn't help but be pleased with this affirmation, and praised, "I didn't expect a kid like you to be able to name all 8 grandmasters. You have some knowledge." You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.